Thank you. There are a few administrative items I'd like to run over before we begin. And this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the Hanford site YouTube. Those in the room, we would appreciate if you would sign in. And those online, we would appreciate if you would enter your name and organization into the chat so we can get your name and representation right. This is an unfamiliar facility to many, so I'd like to let you know if you need to use the bathroom, those are through the north doors. The elevators you came in are through the south doors. And that's about everything. Susan.
Susan, you're up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. I hope everyone is enjoying sunny Spokane. Those that are here and those that are online will enjoy it for you. How's that? Again, quorum is going to be necessary for us to complete any business this today and tomorrow. So we need everybody engaged. So I'm just going to go ahead and a couple of things I wanted to mention. One is that we have several people that this is their last meeting, that they're rolling off the board, and I want to make sure that they are recognized and that they understand we really do appreciate their service. And I'm staring at Steve because he's the top of my list. I'm going to just run through the list. Steve, and so welcome and thank you. Tracy Arnold, Dan Strom. Thank you, Dan. Aaron Ashley, Mason Murphy, and Toby Patrick from the CTUIR. Jeff Wyatt and Michael Mays. So all of you, thank you for your service to the HAB. We really have appreciated it, and I hope you've enjoyed your time with the HAB. Secondly, I would like to recognize that back in May, we had a couple of individuals from EPA and Air Force attend our meetings. They're working on a board of their own. So they're looking to possibly lessons learned from us and talking to us for any questions they may have. And we're supposed to have Jack Mapes. Yes, from the Air Force. Thank you. Welcome. And during breaks, feel free to pick anybody's brain that you want. And so that's all I've got. Let's roll on into business. Oh, do I need to walk through the agenda or Josh, you gonna do it? I don't remember.
Yes, for the first half of today, we'll be running over several HAB work items. We'll be beginning with the fiscal year 2025 draft work plan and calendar. We'll be hearing about 3 pieces of draft advice. The first focused on traffic safety. The second related to TPA public response or comment acknowledgement. And the third related to the role of alternates on the Hanford Advisory Board. We'll break for a lunch at 4:30, or sorry, 4, return at 5:30 to hear agency updates and a presentation on PFAS at Hanford. And we can go around the room for introductions. I can start. My name is Josh Patnod. I work for the HAB facilitation team.
Lindsay Summers, Department of Energy.
Dave Enan with EPA.
Steve Anderson, Grant and Franklin County Representative, and it has been a joy. Thank you very much.
Rob Parmalee, representing non-union and non-management employees.
Max Woods, Oregon Department of Energy.
Dan Strom, Benton Franklin Health District.
Larry Bragg, Public at Large.
Rebecca Holland, Hanford Atomic Metal Trades Council. Pam Larson, Benton County.
Susan Coleman, Public at Large.
And I'm going to go down the teams list as I see them. I apologize in advance for mispronunciations. Please be ready to open your mic and introduce yourself, starting with Annette Carey. Theater Boardman,
Central Plateau Cleanup Company.
and Ambika,
Ambika Chakrabarti, ECY, Ecology, Washington.
Chris,
Chris Sutton, Public at Large.
Chuck,
Chuck Torelli, City of Kennewick.
Patrick,
Patrick Conrad, HMIS.
Dan,
Dan
Good
Solich
afternoon.
for the public.
Dave,
Dave DeSimone, engineer, Washington Department of Ecology.
Aaron,
Aaron Breich, Benton Franklin Council of Governments.
Earl,
Earl Fordham, Washington State Department of Health.
Gabe,
Gabe Bonnie, that's First Tribe, Public.
Matt,
There's a more than one Matt Hendrickson, Oregon Department of Energy.
Hollis,
Yeah, I'm from Spokane, Washington, representing the general public. I'm also involved with Veterans for Peace, Nuclear Abolition Working Group, and the Vets for Peace, Depleted Uranium, Cluster Munitions, and Landmines Working Group.
thank you. Jeff,
Jeff Wyatt, Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board.
Jim,
Jim Conca, Tridec.
Kermit, none. Jane,
Jane LePage, Washington State Department of Health.
then the other Dan McDonald,
Good afternoon, Dan McDonald with Ecology.
Mia,
Mia Burke, Hanford Challenge.
Padriak,
That's Pat Fox, DNFSB, Resident Inspector.
Ben,
Ben Pruitt, Washington Ecology.
Tom,
Tom Cecilia, Oregon Department of Energy.
Simone,
Simone Anter, Columbia River Keeper.
Wayne,
Wayne Barber, Exchange Monitor Reporter.
all right, and that concludes everyone who's exclusively online. Thank you. As soon as Tim sits down, we will. All right, so the first item on the agenda is the draft work plan and calendar. Who would like to introduce this?
I'm happy to take care of that, Josh. So welcome, everybody. What you have in front of you is the fiscal 2025 work plan and draft calendar. So this should be pretty straightforward, as most of you, or pretty much everybody, should have had the opportunity to review the documents. The biggest change for FY25 on your work plan is you will see items outlined for your executive steering committee, as well as topics that were identified as potential full board briefings. Go ahead, Josh.
Okay. Is there any other comments or questions anyone has regarding the next year's work plan?
Ecology or EPA, do you have anything to add to the work plan discussion or introduction?
No, just again, the work plan is important. It gives us a starting point, and I want to remember that we keep a little bit of flexibility.
Thank you, Dave. So one thing that we try to do is we try to keep the topics on the work plan kind of broad, and that way we would work with your committee leadership to then frame those briefings as they come forward. But there is the opportunity for emerging topics to be added if if something comes up. Becky?
So when you said that the changes that were outlined, is that on the legend here? Is that what you're talking about? Or
So I'm talking
throughout
about the work
document?
plan first.
Okay.
So it's just outline different, different items. So for example, for the full board briefing, we are looking at potentially having a topic of increasing HAB member and public participation and have that be more of a discussion, as well as the draft Hanford site-wide permit revision 9A. So we anticipate those topics to come to the full board.
We have a question online from Chuck. Go ahead.
Real quickly, should we be talking about the calendar at this point also, or is that a separate issue?
So let's talk about if there are any questions on the work plan, and then we can move to the calendar. Chuck, does that work for you?
Perfectly.
And one thing we also did on the calendar for FY25, just for your awareness, is that we were told there were city council meetings on Tuesday evening. So we did shift the full board briefings to Wednesdays and Thursdays. So you'll see those placeholders on your calendar. But any questions on the work plan for the agencies?
And if you're in the room, you can ask a question by raising your table pin, as Susan has just demonstrated. If you're online, you can raise your hand in Teams. Susan, go ahead.
I noticed that the tribal holidays are not included.
Correct. We are still waiting for a response from the Hanford Tribal Office, so those will be added when received.
Okay, thank you. And then I'd asked, because I've worked with a lot of engineers, so I like words spelled out because words mean different things to different people. And in the back, we use the terms advice, action, and informational. And especially the advice/action. I'd ask that those be defined in the document so that way people all have a common understanding of what those words mean.
Correct. You did make that request. As time is of the essence for the approval of this document, the agencies are still working on that, but we have not forgotten about it. So that will be added at a later date.
Other questions? My button's a little finicky. Other questions, thoughts, or concerns? So if everyone understands it, does everyone agree with it? Larry?
So a tribal holiday does not need to be approved by the Hanford Advisory Board. So if there ended up being a conflict on what is on the draft calendar right here, what would potentially be approved, that would go back to the ESC for further discussion and then a shift in dates. So it would be distributed to the full board, but we wouldn't need full board consensus to shift the dates if required. And as far as the informational action and advice request for those to be defined, that again would be a definition provided by the tri-party agencies and not something that we would look for the board's approval on, just something that we are responding to that request for that addition.
All right, Mia online. Go ahead.
I think Larry has a faulty mic because I can't hear him when he speaks. But I could hear everyone else when they were doing introductions. It might just be me, but for those online, can you hear Larry when he asked a question?
It doesn't stay, but the button doesn't stay pushed.
Oh, and now I can hear you.
Yeah. I'll be more careful in the future.
Thank you.
It's worth noting these are toggles rather than holds. I am also working on getting used to that. Further comments or questions on the work plan? Oh. Pam?
Given that we have a quorum right now, can we adopt this today?
With the board's agreement, yes. Okay, so with no further, looks like we're all in agreement on the work plan portion. Do we need to shift to questions and comments on the calendar portion?
That would be my recommendation. It looks like Susan has her card up. Okay. So Chuck?
Yeah,
Oh,
Chuck and then Mia.
basically, what I saw was, and it could just be my printer, Committee of the Whole is showing up on the calendar, and it's mentioned in the work plan as there will be 2 Committee of the Wholes. I cannot find that color on the calendar I printed out, which is apparently, according to my eyes, kind of a pale green. So are there Committee of Wholes meetings scheduled for fiscal year 25?
Hi, Chuck. Thank you for asking that question. And I was going to actually bring that up during the calendar conversation. So typically a committee of the whole is when there is a topic that is of interest across all of the subcommittees that may produce advice. And so because we had only identified, I believe, one topic, which is the comprehensive land use plan, long-term stewardship, it was discussed at the ESC and then the subsequent subcommittee meetings that we would not identify those dates at this time. However, we would provide ample notification when those topics were selected and then scheduled. Does that make sense?
It does, and it's good to know I'm not going colorblind. Thanks.
Definitely not going colorblind, so I apologize for any confusion on that one, but I do appreciate the flexibility.
Mia, your question.
My question's related to Chuck's. So I know in the work plan we had a caveat about committees of the whole, and I'm hoping that we can add something to the calendar for this exact reason, of saying that there are something to the effect of there are 2 committees of the whole that are TBD to be scheduled in FY, this year. Otherwise, if you only look at the calendar and not the work plan, you're not going to understand that there are 2 committees of the whole.
That makes sense to me. So Josh, I would recommend that the facilitation add that same caveat to the calendar at the bottom.
Making that note. Other comments or questions? Rebecca?
I see in June that we have the leadership workshop. Is that, so it's only scheduled for one day?
Correct.
Okay. Not seeing any more questions. Does everyone agree with the calendar as presented? Chuck?
Josh, do you need a formal motion second and then a vote on these? Would that be helpful to y'all?
Yes, we will do a consensus check. We're working through the first portion of that. We're confirming everyone understands it. Then now working to confirm everyone agrees with it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So looks like there are no other comments. Would you like to go around the room and confirm this agreement? No. Steve, how do you feel about it? Got a thumbs up. Rob? Matt? Dan? Larry? Confirmed. Rebecca?
I just have a quick question, another one. What's the green box on the legend that there's nothing next to it? What is that supposed to be?
Those are the committee of the wholes, which have yet to be placed on the calendar.
Well, the committee of the whole has already got a box. I'm just wondering what the green outline, is that something that's going to come up later or?
I believe that would have been for the tribal holidays, correct, Josh? Right here.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong green. Yes, that is the placeholder for the tribal holidays for when those are available. Continuing our tour, Tim gives a thumbs up. Pam? Pam agrees. And Susan?
I still have apprehension about having a full board meeting in September and would prefer that the August committee meetings and the September board meetings be swapped. As you know, we're just barely making quorum today. September is just a really busy month. So can I live with it? Yes. Do I still want to voice my apprehension?
Okay, so you can live with it. Will you support it?
If I have to, I will. If the group approves it, I will support it.
All right. So that is everyone in the room having given somewhere between a thumbs up and a sideways thumb.
This is Jim Conca, thumbs up, but I don't really know how to do the thumbs up.
Perhaps for simplicity online, does anyone not support it? Chris, do you have a comment? Oh, I see a thumbs up on his camera. Oh. Max, go ahead.
I was going to ask more to Sue's point about swapping the days in August. It's kind of hard because people here today are the people here today, so you can't ask the people who aren't here. Would that make a difference? Do you think you'd get better attendance with an early August meeting? I mean, August is vacation season too, so it's probably not also a great month for having a meeting. But just curious to hear your point more.
Based on last year, because we had the meeting in August, we had really good attendance. So I'm basing it on that data. The other nuance to my perspective is that if we have the full board meeting in August, committees in October or in September, then we could have the full board meeting for the first month of fiscal year 26 in October, like we did last year or the year before, and have orientation in connection to, in conjunction with a full board meeting. So we have all three of them connected, and the new members could go through orientation and then come right into a full board meeting. We did that about a year or so ago, and it just seemed to work pretty well. That's where I'm coming from.
So just for everyone's awareness, the rationale to outline the calendar as such is the board does not work in July, right? So you will meet in May for your board meeting. You will have your subcommittees in June. July is off. And in this scenario, for this specific board meeting, we have 3 pieces of advice that came forward at the August board meetings. And so that month before provided the subcommittees the opportunities to meet, to pass their advice, and be prepared to come to September. So that was the thought process and why we have that meeting scheduled for September. Now, if there is the proposal to make all of the changes that Susan just shared, that's something that I will need to take back because it's not something that's been discussed via the TPA agencies.
Dan and then Rebecca.
My question is, when Sue talked about having the board meeting in October, can we count on DOE to have appointed new members by October? Because it's, at least during the pandemic and afterwards, the appointments were not forthcoming in a timely fashion. So I think it'd be a mistake unless we had some assurance that we would have new members appointed by then. I believe for this year, they are in place, but that would be kind of lame, I think, if the new members hadn't been appointed by October.
So Dan, the last 2 years, the new members have been appointed in the July timeframe. So, and I shouldn't say appointed, their appointment letters were distributed in July for an October 1 start date. So I anticipate that we will keep chugging right along with our membership drive, and there should not be any delays that I'm aware of at this time. Rebecca?
So I know we've had the board meetings in September because that was like near the end of the fiscal year and the TPA agencies could give their updates, what they've done in the past year. Which I like having it in September, but hearing Susan's argument, I think it does hold some merit. When we get new members, and then we could also do their orientation at the same time, and then they could attend that whole board meeting if, like you said, that the packets have been approved. And, so, I mean, either way for me, but I think that, Susan's got a valid point as far as new members coming on and being able to participate.
So for this year, I'm taking a look. So you're hoping to have a board meeting in August and then another one in October is what I'm hearing. And foregoing the November meeting, is that what I'm understanding? So not for for FY25. So what I'm hearing is you want to switch the board meeting to August, the subcommittee meetings to September. And with that being said, that is with the understanding that the board will not meet in July, so the group will need to do any work on advice as a subcommittee in June. Because the next opportunity to meet as a subcommittee would not be again until September.
Any thoughts on this proposal?
Again, this is something that I'll need to take back, so not something that we can get a quorum approval today.
Chuck, your thoughts?
Right now, I would say, let's go with what is and structure it for fiscal year 25, 26 to look at doing it differently.
There, Rebecca again.
Okay. So just throwing this out there, how about if we approve this work plan and then the tri-party agencies can have a discussion about moving those? We've moved stuff around on the calendar before. It's not, for another year down the road. Just getting our work plan and our calendar approved is important, and we do have a quorum. I think that is important, but but that's something that can be talked about, later with the tri-party agencies.
I'm okay with that as long as the group is okay with that. I know that some folks are very big planners. They like to plan ahead and they don't want any changes to the calendar after it's been adopted. So if folks are of the understanding that there will be further discussion for August and September, then the group can move forward with their quorum approval. However, there is the anticipation it might change, and then there is the potential it might not.
Sam and then Larry.
I agree with what Rebecca and Susan have said in terms of having the full board meeting in October when you've got a new board. Get those people engaged, let them know what they're in for. We've been doing advice a couple months before the meeting a lot. It's not that big of a deal. Thank you.
We'll have Larry and then Mia. Larry, go ahead.
I think that if we put off the decision, it should be resolved quickly next year or late this year. I would hate to see this put off until May or something, because that would ruin people's plans. I tend to agree with Susan's discussion and her proposal.
All right, and Mia?
I agree with Susan's proposal and also what Becky said about adopting this today, but also with the possibility of changing the dates for the full board meetings and the committee meetings in August and September and rearranging. I don't think we should put it off, but I think we should keep it open to be able to change it after the fact.
Chris?
If I remember correctly, I think one of the major reasons for having committee meetings in October, right after orientation, instead of a full board meeting, is that the discussion, and I can't remember whether it was the ESC or some other place, felt that if we had committee meetings, then we could get new people, have them join the committee right off the bat, and get them involved in committee work and see what the committees were doing on, what was happening in the various committees. And it was felt maybe that would go a long way toward getting people involved right off the bat. So I think that was a discussion that we had for having committee meetings in October instead of a full board meeting.
All right, so we have a couple of proposals in this case. Oh, sorry, Rob, go ahead.
Linda, you mentioned going back to the TPA to talk to them about it. Is there approval required for any change to the schedule, or is that just something to see if it's within their time frame for scheduling? I guess I don't know the process. I'm curious about it.
I can only speak for the department, but it has to do with the senior leadership availability to support.
Okay.
So this has already been run by senior leaders. Everything is kind of outlined for FY25 for the department. And so if there is a change and there's a conflict, I don't want to say, oh, yes, we can swap these weeks, and then we come in and I'm giving your agency update, because that's not what you're looking for. So I just want to make sure that I'm doing my due diligence on my end. So the group is, welcome to move forward with adopting the calendar as such, and I can take it back. However, like I said, I just can't commit to making the change this late in the game when it's already gone through the ESC and all of the various subcommittees. Thank you.
So the proposal is currently accepting the work plan calendar as presented. The TPA agencies will confirm what can be supported in regard to swapping the August and September HAB meetings. And there will be further consideration for fiscal year 26 as to whether or not the HAB will meet in October or November. Is that everyone's understanding? All right, so we have gone around the room confirming confirmation. And does that still stand in everyone's case with the new proposal?
We got a new guy.
Richard, do you agree with the work plan calendar as presented?
Yes.
All right, so everyone in the room agrees? Nobody, no objections noted? Are there any objections from those online? I'm hearing silence. It sounds like consensus. All right. So with a couple of caveats, the fiscal year 25 work plan and calendar have been adopted. And we are slightly early. However, Richard has joined us. Our next item on the agenda is discussing the draft advice on traffic safety. Would you like to give us an introduction?
The draft advice on basically the LIDS committee, which used to be the H subcommittee, for years have been talking about traffic safety for the workers out there, because it does represent one of the the greatest risks that they face. In response to Advice 301, which was issued just before the pandemic, there was a study performed looking at the roads and making recommendations. This advice basically supports some of the recommendations in that study, doesn't disapprove other recommendations, just doesn't address them, as well as other advice items that we had previously suggested relative to the 300 area fire station, which was going away and now it's staying because of the 324 activities are ongoing. And so we've included advice to quote, advise DOE to address potential safety issues of impacts with that fire station and pedestrian safety issues in the 300 area.
Are there any questions from the board regarding this draft advice? I have a question online from Jeff Wyatt. Go ahead.
Paragraph 4 in background talks about grouting and basically shipping liquid radioactive waste off-site. So this comment could be construed to indicate that the HAB supports shipping liquid radioactive waste off-site, and I don't think that's true. In fact, it's certainly not true for the Oregon delegation. So I would suggest that we either delete the paragraph or delete any reference to shipping liquid radioactive waste off-site. Thank you.
Is there anyone that feels strongly about this paragraph, or would you like any objections to it being edited?
I do.
So Pam and then Susan. We have
ahead.
Chris and Q.
The wording says, if the tri-party agencies decide to ship tank waste off-site to be grouted, this will increase the number of heavy vehicles on the existing roadway. It doesn't say they should or they shouldn't. It says if it will have an impact on the roads. So I disagree with the previous person's suggestion that it be pulled. It's a significant issue.
With that emphasis, can you live with it, Jeff?
No, I cannot.
All right. Okay, so Richard, as the IM team lead, how would you like to proceed on that paragraph?
I have a suggestion.
Oh,
So-
go ahead, Max.
What if we just remove the phrase "to be grouted"? And then it would simply say, if the agencies decide to ship tank waste off-site, implying that it could be grouted at Hanford or, I guess, grouted somewhere else. Good enough?
That would certainly be acceptable to me.
Okay.
I accept that.
All right. We have deleted the phrase "to be grouted," still accounting for tank waste being shipped off-site. And Chris, your thoughts on the advice?
In the third paragraph, there's a sentence that reads, it is the board's understanding that current planning does not anticipate road improvements to be initiated until 2030 or beyond. That's a little vague, and it's where did this understanding come from? So my suggestion is to add another sentence before that. And that sentence should say that in the 2024 to 2028 5-year plan, there are no mission critical, it does not anticipate any mission critical work with regard to building roads. And then you could follow it up with say, additionally, it is the board's understanding. But that 2024 to 2028 5-year plan that has nothing in about roads is a concrete document that DOE has issued. And so that I think solidifies or puts a document that's in the public domain saying we're not having any roads in this time frame. And then if you say further, it is the board's understanding that could take it to the 2030 or beyond.
Okay, so Chris, the sentence was too long for me to follow up my slow typing speed. Can you enter that into Teams chat for us?
Okay.
Does anyone have any thoughts on the proposed sentence? Looks like general agreement. Other questions or thoughts on this draft? Mia, go ahead.
Mine is starting in the third paragraph. I believe the date is wrong. I think it's instead of November 2025, I think it's August of 2025 is for hot commissioning. And then my other correction is, I think in paragraph 5, the second sentence, if we could remove the word badging, because I know we talked about this in the committee and it was causing some confusion. If we just said, especially during peak delays, that would, I think, make it more clear.
All right. Any other thoughts or questions?
Could you go back up to the previous change you were typing in?
Yeah, Chris's is presently incomplete. He'll be providing us that wording. Rebecca?
So that sentence is not complete. He's gonna.
Right, he
Okay.
talked a little faster than I could type, sorry.
Yeah, okay. I think that doesn't mean.
I will remove it for interim confusion. Right. So I'm not seeing any other questions or comments. Okay, we'll be adding Chris's.
I put in the sentence in chat now, Josh.
I think they already are making glass at DFLAW, right? It's not hot commissioned, but it's making glass in the, non-radioactive form right now. Not to throw another wrench into this wordsmithing here. But, if they are making glass right now and they will start shipping some of those test canisters offsite, the first test canisters will be shipped offsite and go to Oregon for disposal. I know that. It's not a lot of them, but a couple. We could put making hot glass. I don't know if that's the right phrase or sort of.
Or we could delete the date.
Stick with the date. Yeah, maybe it's good enough. I think the implication is accurate.
So was that a change to the date or leaving it?
I think we just delete the date because it's superfluous.
Yeah, there you go.
Or to say hot
think so.
commissioning.
Well, just say making glass.
Ah, well, there you go.
All right. So that's how
Same,
it appears.
to the point, it's hauling the stuff for the glass, so.
Want to change it? Okay.
Plat,
Okay.
right.
Agreement on this change?
That looks good.
And Steve, your thoughts?
Different, I don't disagree with this change, but I was looking for clarification, maybe from Mia on the badging when we talk about during peak badging delays. Are we just kind of trying to describe what's often a peak disruption or delay being badging? Or what? Can you help me out with that?
I mean, if we could go delays at the badging station, that's why it was badging delays.
Yeah, and Mia,
Mia,
help
can
me?
you live with just having badging in there?
No, that was the confusion from the discussion at the committee meeting, because badging happens not at the Y barricade. And so I think Lindsay was bringing up, from my understanding or recollection, that the way it was worded, using the word badging, was confusing. And I looked back at the study because I thought I had taken that wording, peak badging delays, from the study, but they were talking about the peak delays of people passing through the Y barricade. At certain times, there's a lot more traffic than at other times.
Right,
So,
but that is where they're badged. That's where the badge is checked.
okay, I just remember from the committee discussion, there was confusion, and so I looked back at the study. They did not use the term peak badging delays, so I just recommended taking out the word badging, so that DOE understood what we were trying to imply. But if it's not confusing, then we can leave it in.
Okay. Well, I mean,
Well, there's the act of getting a badge, and then there's the act of your badge getting checked.
Correct.
So
And
those are the two things I think were strong.
Yeah. Correct. And so when I hear badging, I think of central badging, where you go to pick up your badge. And so Mia and I had a conversation after the completion of the meeting. And so she, as shared, looked into it and said that the verbiage that she thought she had pulled from the study was incorrect. So she had followed up saying that she would propose removing the word badging, which she did. And so that's kind of how we got where we're at right now, which is to remove that word badging.
Can we just substitute badge checking for badging? It's very clear what that means.
You can do whatever you want. I don't think it's necessary.
Can I make a suggestion?
Please.
Yeah, I think the word badging is, yeah, it means different things to different people. I would say, especially during peak, security delays, that's really what it is when you're going through the Y barricade. Patrol is checking everybody's badge. It's for security. So, I mean, you could put it in there or leave it out, just say peak delays, but that's really what it is. When they're checking everybody's badge, it's for security.
well, I mean, it's actually where you have peak employee flows.
Right, but they wouldn't be checking your badge if it wasn't for security reasons.
Some head nodding in the room. Mia, as the one who suggests this change, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, that's great to me.
Other thoughts or questions on this advice?
Okay, so we're changing that to
It's become, especially
Security.
during peak security
security
delays. Dave,
Sorry, just can't help being a bit of a word person and a bit weird. security delays, talking about reduced delays, it seems a bit repetitive. It's the barricade traffic, peak traffic. I mean, I know this is advice on traffic
Right.
safety.
I sort of agree.
So I'd shift to the usage. peak
Yeah,
usage,
let's
peak
just go
traffic.
to during peak traffic. I think that's a better way of expressing it. It's not a security issue. It's just simply there are a lot of badges to be checked.
Yeah,
So
I think we're just trying to define what the crux of what's causing those congestion points.
the cause is just
Yeah.
a lot of people.
Right. But there's an activity that's occurring, and
Well, no,
that's
it
what you were
occurs all
trying
the
to say.
time, but when there are a
Right.
few people, it's really quick.
Yeah.
So I think peak traffic. Does that sound good?
So from the department's perspective, peak delays, peak traffic, I mean, we will understand what it is that the board is trying to communicate. I defer to the group, obviously, on what it is that they would like to see in here, but I don't think that it should be a word that you guys are getting stuck on.
Right.
We understand.
Larry, how do you feel about it?
No, just coming in. Yes. We could add peak morning traffic, but that's.
All right, Chuck, how do you feel about it?
Basically, I think anyone who's worked at Hanford understands whether you say badging delays, traffic delays. It's kind of one of those deals. Traffic works for me. You know, it's just a function of being out there. You get your badge checked going through the Y barricade or rattlesnake or Yakima, and that's the culture. So I think Lindsay is correct. DOE is going to understand it, whatever word we use.
Rebecca?
So maybe since we're kind of so hung up on this, maybe we should just remove that whole, especially during peak, whatever word we decide, delays, just remove all that. And then the divided 4-lane road would reduce delays at the Y barricade, which can be as long as 7.5 minutes.
I agree.
Take that sentence out of there, then we're not all hung up on what kind of a delay it actually is. You okay with
I
that?
agree.
All right.
Fewer words, the better. The fewer words, the better.
Okay, it's been edited to reflect Rebecca's suggestion. Other questions, thoughts? Max, look okay.
It is on a different section. This is a good idea, Rebecca. You have a good idea. I have a different question. If that's okay. On the third paragraph, there's a sentence that says Hanford's employment at the 200 East and 200 West areas is projected to grow by 1.018% by 2029. Is that 1.018% the right number? Why 3 significant digits and why just, 1% seems like it's not much. Is that right? I'm sorry, I didn't write this. I don't know.
I think that was taken out of the engineering study.
Right,
So
that's
instead
why
of,
there's a footnote
like
3
verbatim
on it.
of that
But no. Oh, there's a footnote.
engineering study, but
Footnote. Okay. But it is accurate. Is that?
Well, that's the engineer's
Based on the
estimate.
estimate.
Is it-
With the
Engineers
site
are known to have 3 digits.
very specific.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
I've had permit issues with that philosophy and not rounding.
Okay. As long as it's accurate, that was it. I wasn't sure. All right. Thank you.
All right. Chuck?
The same issue. I mean, that's a number only an engineer can love. No offense, Rich, but if we say grow by 1%, I did try to go to reference 3 and I get blocked. It doesn't allow me. I get an error message. So, but I would think of fewer words are better, fewer number placements are better too. Grow by 1% by 2030 or 29.
They jump to rounding down.
Okay. So on the screen, we'll see that has been edited to 1% rounding down. Everyone support that. Larry.
So that data, that 1% may very well not be accurate because that was from an engineering study from 2012 that was revised in 2020 during the COVID issue. And I think that data just bounced forward from 2012 and we're using it today. And I have no idea whether that's accurate or not, but I suspect it's double or half that or some, some other number. And I would be suspect putting an exact number in there. And I agree that it's for engineers only. It's, it has nothing to do with.
I think in committee, it was forced upon me. We could drop that out, but I think it's important to leave the 1% just simply to reference into the study, just to have the footnote. Is there extreme objection to leaving the 1%? No?
This is Jim Congo. Why not just say is projected to grow, comma, and then put the
reference.
Just after grow. I mean, you don't really have to say anything. A number is
and just put the reference on the grow.
Yeah.
Okay, let's go with that. How's that?
To confirm, is that just grow by 2029?
No, just to grow, and then just put
grow,
the
period, yeah.
footnote. Put the footnote on the grow. There you go.
Yep, that's my recommendation. That's a good job, Rick.
All right.
I think with the revised first sentence of this paragraph, it's now uses the word start twice, which is a little weird. So it probably should just be, I'm sorry, my eyes aren't that good. With the startup of the FIT plant, with the startup of the FIT plant to start making glass, that sentence is a little weird. Maybe that second to start should be removed. With the startup of the FIT plant expected. Or maybe with the startup of the FIT plant. With the startup of the FIT plant. Right, isn't that really what it is? But the startup of the FIT plant, that's it. Yeah, okay.
Yeah,
that looks
okay.
Good.
I like that. Okay. Fewer words. We're getting there. My goal was a 1-page advice originally.
Ambitious. That's good.
On that third paragraph again, the glass canisters are going to the IDF, aren't they? I don't think they're going to be shipped to anywhere on Route 4S.
Oh, no, but the glass will. The glass coming in the frit.
Those aren't glass canisters. I think glass canisters are referring to the vitrified glass that's going to the IDF.
Right.
It won't go on 4S to the IDF.
Does that result in suggested changes?
Oh.
Other thoughts, questions, or concerns? Not seeing in the room, not seeing any online. Would the board like to adopt this advice today? Okay, sounds like there are no further questions. Not hearing any objections to adopting. Would we like to go around the room and confirm everyone's acceptance? I see a enthusiastic thumbs up from Steve and Rob. How do you feel, Max?
I support the advice as edited. It's good.
All right. Oh, sorry, Larry, did you have a question?
I approve of this, but can I make a statement regarding this?
You may.
At this point. I agree with the revised and I would give my approval to it. But I have several reservations. One is that we've made the same kind of request several times before and not really received any kind of positive response, like it's in the plan or it's something of that sort. It's usually been taken under advisement. And so I don't know how to break that nut, and hopefully this would do that. But I think that the whole traffic safety issue is not complete. I think it's just a piece of the work, a good piece, but a starting point. By 2028, we will double the number of semis operating within the site. Some of them are hauling glass canisters to temporary storage, and then the fret coming in on I don't know, a daily basis, I would assume. And so I think that the truck portion of that should also be addressed, not within this count. I think this is done. I like this, but I think there's more to be done there, and possibly some additional road improvement to accommodate some of the trucking that is occurring. So I would like to have the board think about that in the future. And otherwise, I'm fine with this.
All right.
So can I ask, Larry, were you supporting a future advice on truck safety specific on site?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
To and from site? Yeah, okay.
There was a request from Jeff White online to note the seats that are approving for clear record. So I'll go over that. Steve represents Grant and Franklin counties. Rob Harmley represents non-union, non-management employees. Max represents the Oregon Department of Energy. Dan represents the Benton Franklin Health District, and Larry represents public at large. Getting our tour around the room. Becca?
So you want me to just say who I represent? Be
Yeah,
easier?
thumbs up and
Okay,
who you represent.
thumbs up, and I represent Hanford Atomic Metal Trades Council.
Richard?
I represent City of West Richland. One thing I'd like to point out to them before we go too far is we also have the advice relative to traffic flow from State Route 240 into Route 10 as one of the bullets under number 1. And that's a holdover from the previous advice we had given. Because Richland's expanding a lot more traffic along 240. And so is West Richland. I'll be feeding that area.
Tim? Get a thumbs up from public at large. Pam?
Pam Larson, Benton County. I've been retired for 4 years, but prior to my retirement, the communities encouraged DOE to bring the frit in to the waste treatment plant by rail to keep trucks off the road. And I don't know what's happened since then. I don't know if the communities have continued to advocate for that, but that's something that would be useful. Thank you.
Thumbs up and public at large.
All right. Going down online, we have Chris. How do you feel about it? We have a thumbs up from public at large. Chuck?
I'm good.
I support it. City of Kennewick.
Thank you. Jeff? Microphone just went off, Jeff.
Oh, sorry. Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board supports.
Jim?
Jim Conker, Tridec, thumbs up.
And that's for Tridec. Kermit? Okay, we'll take silence as no objection. Michael? Mia?
Hanford Challenge supports it.
Simone?
Columbia Riverkeeper supports.
And that is everyone that's exclusively online. Sounds like the advice
Let
has
me
been.
jump back in. I was having a hard time finding my microphone.
Ah.
Yeah, you're correct. I have no objection. Thank you.
Thank you. That was Current Miller with the Nez Perce Tribe. It has a pass with the edits we've gone over today.
Thank you, guys.
Can we we'll get a cleaned up copy of it though, correct?
Yes, I can send that out when cleaned up, and Susan will sign the one on the official letterhead.
Okay.
And thank you everyone for this conversation. I think that I have some work to do with Richard and Rebecca in planning a future traffic safety discussion at the LIDS subcommittee meeting.
Addendum to my previous statement, the best place to find the edits will be in the appendix of the meeting minutes. I do include changed documents in those every single time. And we are about 7 minutes ahead of time. Would we like to take a slightly early break? All right, we will return at 3 o'clock.
Thank you.
All right, our next item is the draft advice on public comment response. And we have Tom Cecilia, the I Am Tim lead online, ready to give us an introduction.
Hey, everybody. So just want to make it clear, I'm here as the IM team lead. Max is in the seat for Oregon Department of Energy. And so when it comes time for consensus, it'll be Max's voice, not mine, but I'm presenting the advice. So I wanted to take the opportunity before dinner to say we finally reached the elusive one-page advice that we always seek. The Community Outreach and Engagement Committee had an IM team looking at, on occasion, one of the agencies solicits public outreach and input and has a engagement period. And that's where like the cleanup priorities come in and some other things. And then there's never a response to the comments that are received or the engagement, outreach, whatever we call it, that the public submits, and which can lead to sort of a feeling that those comments are not heard or paid attention to. So this advice simply says, if you ask for advice, or if you ask for comments, or if you ask for engagement or input, you should respond. You should publish what you receive and provide a response of some kind, whether that response is thank you for the comment, we've incorporated into the cleanup priorities for the next year, or just thank you for your comment. Just acknowledging the work that goes into comment letters and engaging in Hanford. And so yeah, that's the advice. It's one advice point, I believe, and look forward to any discussion.
Any questions or comments on the advice?
I just wanted to thank Tom. Yes, it's simple, it's basic, it's straightforward, and it's definitely needed. Thanks, everybody.
This is Jeff White. I would second Steve's comment. Good job.
All right. 2 accolades. Any Any questions? Any concerns? All right. Well, it appears everyone is quite content with it. Would the board like to adopt this advice today? I hear yeses of some varieties. Is there anything that would need to be said that would block consensus? Okay. So continuing our pattern, go around the room, getting our thumbs up. Start with Steve. Grant Franklin counties, got Rob Parmalee with non-union managed employees, Max Woods with Oregon Department of Energy, Dan Strom, Ben Franklin Health District, Larry Brandt, Public at Large, Rebecca Holland, Hanford Atomic Metal Trades Council, Richard Bloom, City of West Richland, got Tim Kovas with Public at Large, Pam Larson, Benton County, and Susan Coleman, Public at Large. Those are very fast thumbs up. Going down the list online, Chris, how do you feel about it? We see a thumbs up from Public at Large. Chuck?
I support it from City of Kennewick.
Jeff?
Jeff Wyatt, Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board supports it.
Jim?
Good thumbs up from Tridex.
Kermit?
Kermit Mankiller and Esper Tribe, no objections.
Michael?
I support it.
Taking silence says no objection from Columbia Basin College. Mia?
Hanford Challenge supports it.
And Simone?
Columbia River Keeper supports it.
All right, thank you. This draft advice has been adopted with no comment. And we're well ahead of the agenda. Mia, are you ready to give an introduction to the draft advice on the role of alternates?
Yes, I'm ready. So going back, I mean, I'm assuming you all remember the discussion we had in the December full board meeting, where changes were implemented that prevented alternates from participating during a full board meeting when the primary member is present. And there was discussion among board members during that meeting, and many concerns were raised regarding those changes. And so Kelly Snyder from DOE headquarters communicated to the executive steering committee that if the HAB wanted to consider appointing alternates in a different capacity than they are currently appointed, then the board should submit advice on what the role of an alternate should be. And so the appointment letters that go to new members are based on the expected role of the alternate or primary member. So the ESC decided to form an IM team to write advice about the role of alternate members. And so I'm the IM team lead, and we have the advice directed not just to Brian Vance and Stephanie Schleif and Dave Enan, but also to Kelly Snyder, which is a little different from usual. But we wanted to make sure that DOE headquarters was also receiving this advice in its full capacity. And so we talk about the role that we believe the alternate members, what their role should be, and then kind of go through. I don't know, Josh, if you have it pulled up, but if we just want to go through the advice and see if there's any questions or comments regarding it.
Are there any initial questions? Not seeing anything in the room yet. Not seeing anything online, but people are considering it. Steve, you look primed for a question.
Just reading back through this as quickly as possible. Interested in what DOE's perspective is on you. There was kind of some stronger concerns over 1 versus 2. Is there any different interests in what we're proposing here?
Can you provide more clarification to what you're asking?
Just from the conversation earlier, it was only 1 person could be looked at in the seat assigned, and an alternate could participate for that person, but couldn't be at the table. And is there a different or a change from DOE's perspective about that?
As far as people like swapping in and out?
Yeah.
So without going into the conversation that we had in December, because it got a little,
I know.
Folks weren't very happy with it. So this is what the advice is moving forward as. So DOE has made their stance clear on what the role of the alternates look like, and that's what's outlined in the appointment letters. Now, with that being said, again, Kelly Snyder said if the group would like it to look different, then to submit advice, and that will be considered. So I think that from DOE's perspective, we've communicated what we think an alternate member's role should be. However, this is the opportunity for the board to provide their thoughts. So I don't want to influence one way or the other. I just want to share where we're at.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I'll have Richard and then Jeff. Richard, go ahead.
Turn my mic on. On the page 3, top of the page, continuation of the last bullet. As such, both primary, I'm starting in the middle of that bullet, as such, both primary and alternate members are eligible to run for elected leadership positions, e.g. HAB chair, vice chair, national liaison, HAB committee chairs, and vice chair, provided that only 1 member per interest serves in leadership at a given time. Now, that would mean that either the primary or alternate is in a leadership position. That isn't clear. And we have had situations where primary and alternate are both in leadership positions, and I have no objection to saying that shouldn't be, but I don't think it's clear what we're asking for here.
So what we're trying to say here is that both primary and alternate members can serve in leadership, but if you have a seat like, let's say, Hanford Challenge, we couldn't have our primary member and our alternate member both serving in leadership positions at the same time. It would be either the primary or the alternate member.
Even if they're in different committees, subcommittees.
Correct.
Okay, but I mean, personally, as a primary, I think I am a primary now. Maybe I'm not.
October 1.
October 1, I'm a primary. Okay. As a primary, I could be in 2 different leadership positions, correct? No? I couldn't be vice chair of 2 different subcommittees? Oh. Never would volunteer for that, but that's okay. All right, that sort of clarifies it. Thank you.
Hey, Pam, was your question in response to this subject or a new one?
This has been a challenging effort to get to this point, and I think this is a good piece of advice. I appreciate the hard work that's gone into it. Thank you.
All right, Jeff, your comment.
I have a question. Many people participate in these meetings via Microsoft Teams virtually. So can you tell me what the IM team's thinking was in terms of how to make that work? Because everyone is not around the quote unquote table. What is the definition of the table in the context of virtual meetings?
Me as IM team leader, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I can't remember the conversation around this one because we've met it's been a while. Does anyone else on the team remember if we talked about this at all?
I thought it was a voting membership, so a person that could vote for their position or their place. That was my December recollection.
So to make it real, if the member is actually sitting at the table during the meeting and an alternate is online and wants to add some information or ask a question, is that okay? Does that work out okay?
Can you repeat that, Jeff?
So the hypothetical is that the member is at the physical meeting sitting at the table. The alternate is online, and the alternate would like to ask a question or submit some information to the board. Is that okay under this proposed advice?
That's exactly the intent that we had as the IM team. Speaking as an alternate who's online with my primary in the room right now.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
So the current structure as it stands is that the alternate member's role is defined in the appointment letter, which states that if the primary member is in attendance, the primary member will provide that representation and that the alternate member can then participate as a member of the public. And so we have tried to do our best to work with the structure that we have and the current membership appointment letters that we have, and we have outlined the last 5 minutes for alternate members to provide their what they wanted, I guess, their opinions or ask questions. And Tom, I apologize, that got missed at the last one. So I did see your email, but we're working through what that looks like, just to try to make it work for everybody with the understanding that there are restrictions and to ensure equity across the whole board because not everybody has an alternate. DOE sees it as one seat, one voice.
Other questions or comments on this advice? Chris? Hey, Chris, your microphone is muted.
I think what Lindsay just said has been one of our key objections to what DOE EMSSAB expects. And that is the alternate acts as a member of the public and can only really participate in the public comment section of meetings. And I think that's what we want to do away with. And my thought is maybe the bullet, like the second bullet in advice, ought to be beefed up somewhat in that regard to make it clear, or everywhere, whatever bullet makes it clear that the alternate does not act as a member of the public when it comes to participating relative to questions, giving advice, giving thoughts, giving their expert opinions or something like that. I really think if we could strengthen that aspect of any of these bullets, so that an alternate is not just a member of the public when it comes to speaking out at a meeting. I think that's really what one of our heartburn items has been.
And we have that in bullet number 4. The board advises that the DFO and TPA agencies refer to alternate members as members of the board, not members of the public, in all communications, including the appointment letters. So we're clear on that alternate members are not members of the public.
And Mia and Chris and Jeff and everyone who has contributed to this conversation, I just wanted to say thank you for your input. And so I'm going to stand back and allow the group to work their advice process.
So does bullet number 4 satisfy your concern, Chris?
Yes, Jeff White here. I like it.
Maybe.
How might it be improved? Oh, well, Chris thinks about that. Steve?
Does it help our argument at all to ensure that it is still a one vote process for that seat? I mean, I definitely want to make sure that, as stated here, that both have voice, but there isn't anything that reinforces the fact that it's still a one vote process. Is there something we should add? Just a question.
And I think we have that under number 1, the one member from each organization interest represented on the EMSSAB at Hanford is counted during formal board consensus or voting actions. So that's just one vote per seat.
Yeah, that takes care of my
Does that
concern.
cover it?
Thanks. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm a slow reader.
Richard?
Piggybacking on that statement back to bullet number 4, what if we add the phrase, the board advises DFO, TVA agencies to refer to the alternate members as I'm suggesting is putting in non-voting members of the board.
I don't agree with that because if the primary member isn't present, the alternate would be the person in that seat that is offering consensus or not.
Other questions or concerns on this advice? Chris?
So if we go back to bullet number 4, and it reads, the board advises that the DFO and TPA agencies refer to alternate members as members of the board. What if we say, add a phrase, including the right to participate in all discussions at board meetings, or something like that?
Currently, they're not limited to that participation, to my understanding.
But not as members of the public, as members of the board. I think that's what we want to be clear. At meetings like this, they can speak up as members of the board, participate in all our discussions. They can't vote, but they can discuss. I just think that ought to be somewhere.
Pam, your suggestion.
I think that's stated in the draft advice. I don't think it needs any additional language. I think it's good. I think we should vote.
Uh, Mia, where is there somewhere you feel like that would be most clearly represented already?
I mean, I think it's, it's above, and then we also have it, I'm just trying to review it. We say it about the committee meetings, so bullet number 2. I think, and we say it in the background for sure. I mean, I agree with Pam, but yeah.
And so bullet number 2 states, advises the DFO and TP agencies to continue to allow alternate members to fully and freely participate as board members during HAB committee meetings. Chris, does that address your concern? You're muted. Hey, Chris, I saw a response, but your microphone is muted.
Can it say allow alternate members to fully and freely participate as board members during board meetings and have committee meetings?
Tom also put in chat another option. I think for the first bullet point after the last sentence, I believe. This includes full participation as members in board discussions. I don't know if you can see that, Josh.
So, okay, help direct me. He said first bullet after the last sentence.
Or he might be, Tom, can you come on and, are you talking about
Yeah.
bullet number 4 or bullet number 1?
Yeah, so after the last period in bullet 4.
All right.
And for clarification for ODOE, Max, Tom, who is representing ODOE today?
Max is voting, I'm on the IM team.
Okay, Chris, does the wording on screen address your concern?
I'm good with that.
All right. And we have Richard.
I was just going to suggest one simple fix, which will address Chris's. Let's move bullet 4 to bullet 2 and rack them down. That way it'll flow as to the alternate as board member and the alternate can participate.
All right. The advice has been reordered. Chris, is that a new question or an old one? All right. Other questions, comments, or concerns? And not seeing any more hands or cards. Does everyone agree with the advice as presented?
Does 2 become redundant then in any way? Since we've added the sentence that like Chris suggested?
That's why I was alternate as the alternate for putting that sentence in. Because next bullet addresses full participation.
So is the proposal to remove the highlighted sentence?
That's what I would propose, you know, one flows into the next.
The difference is that the third bullet now, it refers only to the HAB committee meetings. And the sentence that's highlighted right now, that refers to full board meetings, I think was the intent.
Oh,
The difference being the word discussions. Any other concerns to address? Would the board like to adopt this advice today? It sounded like the sentence was adding a clarification, differentiating general board discussions versus board meetings. So before we start going around the room, I would like to open it for questions from our attending alternates. Is there anyone with questions to address? Does not appear so. And I heard a confirmation on passing this advice today. So we'll once again go around the room. We have Steve Anderson, Grand Franklin Counties, Rob Parmalee, non-union, non-management employees, Max, thumbs up from Oregon Department of Energy, Dan, Ben Franklin Health District agrees, Larry, Public at Large agrees, Becca, agreement from Hamtech, agreement from Richard, West Richland, Tim Covis, thumbs up from Public at Large, Pam Larson, Benton County agrees, and Susan Coleman, Public at Large agrees. Going down the online list, Chris, how do you feel about it?
Agree.
Agreed. Chuck?
City of Kennewick agrees.
Finding the next person, Jeff.
Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board supports.
Jim?
Jim Conca, Shattuck supports.
Wonderful. Kermit?
Nez Perce supports.
And Michael?
Columbia Basin College supports.
Thank you. Mia?
Hanford Challenge supports it.
And Simone?
Columbia River Keeper also supports it.
All right. This advice has been adopted with revisions. And with that, the board has worked through every single decision item on its agenda. The next agenda item is the tri-party agency updates, which is at a hard beginning time of 5:30, as will be depending on the presence of our presenters. So my suggestion would be to take an early lunch. Do you agree? All right. We will return at 5:30. All right, we are at 5:30. We have each of the agency representatives with us. Who would like to lead us off? Mr. Vance, go ahead.
All right, great to be here tonight. Thanks for the opportunity. So we'll go through the slides and we'll talk about some progress aspects, and I'll talk a little bit about what we see as for fiscal year and calendar year 25. It's a really exciting time at the site. So I want to make sure we capture that in tonight's discussion. So the first slide, you've seen this slide many, many times. I think it's just important to continue to focus on what our mission is. And we support a wide range of activities, really wide range of activities across the Tri-Cities and across our tenants and folks like that. But our one galvanizing, central, anchoring theme is safely and effectively treating tank waste and delivering environmental remediation. And so whenever we talk about everything else we're trying to support, And if there's a priority choice, that's the priority we always choose. And that's important because maybe we make this look easy. It's not easy. And so it's important to recognize that. Wide range of activities, as you always see. We kind of think of the site in 3 different product lines now as a means of communicating a little bit more effectively. The tank waste, stewardship, treatment, disposition product line, risk reduction product line, which is sort of the more traditional demolition, soil remediation, soil groundwater program, and then base operations and infrastructure. And all 3 are important. If we don't have the right base information or base operations and infrastructure, we can't do some of those other things. And so we're looking at the overall investment profile across the site to ensure we're prioritizing the work and the funding in areas to continue the mission going forward. And the 5 focus areas, those have been pretty consistent for a long time. They have proven to be very effective in leading the transformation of the site that we've executed over the last 5 or 6 years, from the remediation, demolition, construction site of the past to the operation site that's in our future. And it continues to be helpful in enhancing the confidence of our stakeholders and the confidence of the tribes and really the team to achieve what we have in front of us, tapping into the potential of our workforce. Next slide, a little bit of an overview. Most of you aware about the budget history. I tend to look at the increasing budgets each year as a validation of confidence in the Department of Energy contractor team, and really more broadly, Department of Energy contractor team and our regulatory partners to move the mission forward. The subcontracting number at the bottom, we subcontract our contractors do as a matter of requirement about $500 million per year to small businesses, some of which are around the Tri-Cities. And so when we think about the broader economic impact, not only of that because of the economic stability, a lot of those companies maybe have started with Hanford and diversified, but 13,000 badged employees. So that, if you think about the Tri-Cities, I think about every badged employee, a family of 4, and this is easy math, right? So 50,000 people connected to the site in some way out of a community of 300,000. When people are on our site, valued for the work they do, feeling good about the progress that we're making, that positivity impacts our entire community. And that's something that's unique that the largest employer, the Hanford site, can do in the Tri-Cities. And then we have the PNNL, our little brother, the National Lab, about 1.5 billion and about 6,500 people. So we have a great relationship with Steve. He hates it when I call him my little brother, but so that's always fun for me to do. But we really do appreciate the lab and the relationship there. And then you can see at the macro level, the investment that the department and our congressional members and through congressional funding through the life of the cleanup of substantial investment that I think we enjoy tremendous support from Senator Murray, Senator Cantwell, Congressman Newhouse, and the entire Washington delegation. Next slide. Tank waste product line. So I'll walk through this pretty quickly, but there's a lot. So the upper left picture, that's the high-level waste facility. We're doing mostly focused on the completion to 90% of the design of the high-level waste facility between now and the end of 2027. That focus on the design, while we're still doing limited construction, but the focus on design is I'd say a lesson learned from the past. And we're applying a tremendous number of lessons learned, not only from DF Law and the waste treatment plant in general, but from other sites across the country to, I'll say, de-risk and optimize the way ahead for the high-level waste facility associated with dry feed low activity waste. Those lessons were not lost, and the people that learned those lessons are part of that team. That's a 55-ton shield door going in. We're doing limited construction now, really the things that we don't think have an impact or will be impacted by the design as it progresses. So low risk of rework, we're really focused on weathering in the facility. So when we transition to full construction, which we plan in 2028, they're working in a weathered in facility. It makes construction easier and will support the efficiency we're trying to achieve in the progress. The second picture on the right is the DFLAW control room. That's tuning feed for Melter 1. We're up to batch 4 and 5 for Melter 1 tuning feed, which should go in within the next two weeks. So Melter 1 is well along the path. Melter 2, we're in the process of going through what's called plenum conditioning for Melter 2, which is the prerequisite for tuning feed. We should be tuning feed for Melter 2 within the next 2 weeks. And so when Melter 1 is being fed, Melter 2 is being fed in the way that we expect it to feed in the future, then we're marching our way down the path to the cold commissioning management assessment on a schedule where we see that starting at the end of September, first week of October, which puts us on path to start cold commissioning in, I'd say, the first week of October or so. So I think we're on path for that. I'm sorry, the first week of November. But good progress there. Tank side cesium removal system, we're in batch 8. We've got over 500,000 gallons, 500,000 gallons in AP106 that's compliant feed, ready to feed the waste treatment plant. Our goal remains to get that tank to between 800,000 gallons and 1 million gallons before we start tank waste treatment next year. Effluent treatment facility is on track to start its first batch or first campaign next month. So we've gone through a number of upgrades at the effluent treatment facility to make sure it's ready to support DF law. And so we've gone through all the operational acceptance testing, and now it's just a matter of a couple of repairs that were identified through that process to be ready to start. So all the piece parts, the systems are coming together for the waste treatment plant. And I'm really pleased to say, and Stephanie and the Washington Department of Health, big part of this, we're now permit complete, 77 permits for 77. But I think that was within the last 2 weeks. We have some permit conditions that we'll figure out as we go along, but that's a big deal, that about 10 years in the making, I think. And it's a celebration for the department, our contractor partners, our regulator partners, and we'll have a little bit of a celebration here in not too distant future to commemorate that. Slide or 3 is really the test bed initiative, and it's a little lower left. You can see what we call the mast, which is what has the pump and the ion exchange column in it that goes right into the tank. The good news with the test bed initiative is all the equipment's installed. We've been through the operational acceptance testing, which follows the construction acceptance testing. We're going through some permit required steps with Stephanie's team. We expect to be in a position in October to treat 2,000 gallons of tank waste, get it staged, and we'll go through a sampling process. We won't ship it probably until next March or April, but we'll have the feed in DOT compliant containers ready to go when all the sampling processes are complete. And we're working now with the facilities in Texas and Utah to make sure they're ready to receive. So that program is working very well. And then bottom right is tank retrievals. We finished AX 101, so we're complete in AX farm. We're still going through the paperwork process. That's just the physical work. And we started A 101 within the last 30 days, and I can't remember the exact date. That's going to continue on into next year. In parallel with that, we're going through the process to bring the evaporator back online. We started a readiness assessment process, identified the fact that there was still more work to be done by Washington River Protection Solutions to get the facility and their team ready to move forward. So we're going to give them the time to be ready. We'll probably go back into the readiness assessment process in January, February timeframe of next year, and then we'll start evaporator campaigns. We're a little bit waterlogged at this point with retrievals. We've got to create space to continue to retrieve, and so I think we'll be able to get 70 to 80% of A101 retrieved with some manipulations we can do within the tanks we have now, but we won't be able to progress until we get the evaporator running again to create more space. Lastly, I'll mention we made the announcement in August about T101 leaking about 200 gallons per year in the T farm. Really no change to the risk profile of our site as a result of that. We're working with ecology on a way ahead, and it kind of ropes back into the leak response plan that was a part of the agreed order of the past. We'll continue to work with our team, but again, if you look at 200 gallons per minute in an area where there was 300,000-ish, actually the number was 383,000 gallons assessed as leaked from the tanks in the T farm, in an area during the National Security Mission discharged tens of millions of gallons through the cascade process. We have active tank groundwater in that area. Doesn't represent a risk to the workers, represent a risk to the community, doesn't represent a risk to the Columbia River, a little bit of an insult in an area that's already been insulted. And so when we make those difficult choices on what we spend our money on, that's not one of them. and we're going to continue to stay the course. And again, work with Stephanie and her team to bear that out. That's it for tank waste. And I'll talk about the public comments later a little bit. Risk reduction, really exciting times at the waste encapsulation storage facility. The mock-up is fully populated in the maintenance and storage facility itself. And they're going through procedure development, testing, things like that. The facility upgrades, the equipment is nearly all installed in the waste encapsulation and storage facility as well. We've actually had a cask on an air skid in the truck lock, moving in and out to practice doing that. The automatic welders that are installed up in the gantry cranes are all in, and we're about 85 to 90% through testing. So we are on track to start moving the first capsule from the waste encapsulation storage facility next year, and in accordance with our current schedule. 100K, really good news there. July basin was dewatered, August it's grouted, and now that risk is basically effectively fully retired, and we're on the path to go be cold and dark at the 200 West, the 100K West reactor by the end of the month, end of September. Groundwater program continues to perform well. We'll get I think we're over 2 billion gallons now. We're just going to get to the 2.2 mark. That's the 10th year in a row. And the 200 West pump and treat just went through an upgrade from 2,500 gallons per minute. And they just completed the 30-day run at 3,400 gallons per minute. So that will assist us in accelerating the Central Plateau groundwater program. And then demolition work continues. You can see at the bottom on the right, some of the work at Redox, but there's been demolition work at Redox, Purex, 100K, and then we're continuing on the path with 324, ultimately to achieve cold and dark. We won't get there in 25, but we will in the current schedule in 26, and then continue moving along with the new path. We're still working with the EPA in some areas there to go through the focused feasibility study, but I think our team and EPA are working very well on that. I don't see any barriers to getting through that process. I was out last week looking at some of the demolition work around 100K. They're making great progress, doing it very safely. And it's impressive to see some of the work they're doing. Next slide, it falls into the base ops and infrastructure. So infrastructure, not everybody understands the magnitude of the infrastructure. So the left picture is one of our 30 meteorological towers on the site. Everyone's seen the big one, the 200-foot tower in the Central Plateau, but we have 29 others that all support, I'll say, the site operations and project operations in various ways. We also provide, service to the National Weather Service, but those upgrades are also part of our broader infrastructure effort. You see the person standing inside of our brand new shiny potable water tank in 200 West. It's filled with water now. We're going through the cleaning and disinfecting process for the water tank. And then the water plant should be construction complete, I'll say late this year, early next year. And then we'll go through about a year's process of commissioning to put that water plant online. I see it going into operations in early 26. I've actually challenged HMIS to do that a little bit sooner, but good progress there. I'd like to retire the 1943 water plant. It's time. With a new water plant that'll support our needs for the future. The North Loop on the right, the folks on the Hilo putting cable out there, they're done, which makes me feel a little bit better. But they've done great work. It's probably 95% complete. All the work, BPA does power lines very well, and this was done with a shared agreement with the department. We're on track to have that circuit energized in May of 2025 because that's tied to the Columbia Generating Station when they do a refueling outage. And we are now part of the emergency power to provide through our circuits to Energy Northwest or Columbia Generating Station. After this is over, that's all provided by BPA. So DOE kind of backs out of that role. But the North Loop was really put in place to enhance the reliability to our power going to the north, to the two melters. When you have two op melters, you want to keep them hot. And this project has been a great success for us. And then we're continuing to work other road projects, water projects, power, sewer, IT, and cyber, which is sort of in the background. HMIS team does a phenomenal job in working the cyber challenges that we have. It's a very evolving, unfunded mandate for the site. So the cyber requirements change almost every day. And so our cyber team, working with our site team, we continue to optimize the overall risk profile with cyber in the mix, because I've got to worry about chemical risk, radiological risk, industrial risk, traffic safety risk, all those elements. Cyber is a part of that. And I think our team does a great job to ensure that, you know, I apply the I can sleep at night standard, and they're making that standard very easy for me. Next slide, integrated site services. And we continue to have a very active exercise program, really providing realistic scenarios that stress the resources. This event in May, we had a release associated with the exercise. We had injured personnel, we had a deceased personnel, we had power interruptions, and we had contamination. And the data that our team is learning gets put into the training and education process that goes into the next drill cycle as well. So at the macro level, that was a site-wide drill, but each of the facilities and each of the areas are doing drills routinely in their area just to continue to train the workforce. About 50% and more in some areas of the workforce is new over the last 5 years. And so we're starting to, you know, we have to make sure that our new teammates, as they come in, are ready to support the mission and react to situations on the site appropriately. And we've got a drill program to support that. And they are doing a great job. The lower right was a STEM day. We had 50 students out at the Hammer Training Center just to kind of look at some of the opportunities that they may have in the world of STEM. And we and our contractor partners are very active in that world. And then the other site services, training and rigging, vehicle maintenance, warehousing and inventory management, all of those aspects are continuing to evolve as the site profile evolves to be ready to support the mission of the future, which is very, very different than the mission of the past. Next slide, base operations. Really no discussion is complete at Hanford without talking about the great work that the Hanford Fire Department does on our behalf, Hanford Patrol, Hammer Training Center, really vital to the health and safety of our workforce and the standards we and our contractor partners place on the health and safety as a top priority of the site. We've had 3 fires on the site this year, 800, 500, and 350 acres each. Our fire teams have done a phenomenal job. We didn't have any situations where I felt like any of our facilities were at risk. And then our standard fire system maintenance program has been rebooted and refocused on over the last couple of years, really doing well, and a little bit of a recovery from, I'll say, a past approach that we uncovered over the last couple of years. And our fire systems program and maintenance is caught up and on track to continue to support the safe operations of the site. Next slide. And we did the holistic agreement negotiations or holistic negotiations agreement sessions, really extensive engagements as we rolled out the 3 documents that capture the agreement. And we did this with Stephanie, her team, and Dave and EPA as well. Went through the 120-day comment period that ended on the 1st of September. And as pictured, there were 3 public meetings in July. Our team did a phenomenal job. Three meetings, 1 in Richland, 1 in Olympia, 1 in Hood River on successive days. And they're out of order in the pictures. The Hood River one's in the middle. I noticed that one I looked at today. But the venues were chosen through a process that we worked with a college and EPA on to create a constructive, respectful discussion, to clarify and support robust and informed public comment. We had a virtual option for everyone. And so if you listened or participated or you want to go back and listen to the recordings, I think you'll find that those conversations and those discussions met the objectives that we had all set for the public comment sessions in each of those locations. And I think they were very, very well done. And the virtual option excluded no one from the ability to participate, which was great. We recently, last week, in fact, had consultation with the Yakima Nation on the agreement. They had also provided public comment as well. And then the Nez Perce have requested consultation as well. And so we expect to schedule that in the coming weeks. But overall, we do appreciate all of the comments. We take that input seriously, and we'll continue to work with the college and EPA on evaluating and responding to those comments as the process dictates, and really pleased with the teamwork that's already in place. Next slide is really just a little bit of upcoming public outreach. Really the department and our contractor partners, we execute a very aggressive and comprehensive external engagement effort to raise awareness and enhance understanding of the important work we're doing at Hanford. This is at all levels. Consistently engaged at the national level. And this just short window National Cleanup Workshop is next week, where I'll be in DC telling our great story. And then we have the State Tribal Government Working Group meeting in Intergov and State Tribal Government Working Group in early December. Regional Oregon Hanford Cleanup Board, Oregon Public Radio is doing a focus on the Hanford site the week of the 23rd of September. So we're excited about that. State and local, the Hanford Advisory Board, City Council briefs. I briefed Richland, West Richland. I've got Pasco on the books, and we'll go and get Kennewick. I live there, so I want to make sure they, get the brief. And then the Speakers Bureau's engagements are out there as well. And then we continue to, look for other opportunities, which is where we appreciate the help of the Hanford Advisory Board, to make sure that we're getting the message out to the broad range of individuals and groups that care about what we're doing at Hanford. And so we'll continue to brief aggressively, and I think that's helped us really educate people on the progress that's being made. We'd like to show everybody by tours, but we can certainly talk about it, and I think we're in a great place for that. So my get off the stage slide, since this is sort of the, we're at the end of the fiscal year, and I have no more insights into the FY25 budget than anybody else does. So you can ask, and I'll tell you that same answer. FY24 has been a great year for us. Not without challenges. There's always challenges at the Hanford site. It's uniquely challenging in every dimension, but if we look at the progress being made and the maturation of our team, and the successes we've made, it's really been exciting. So if we think about looking forward, 2025 and really through the end of the year, there's a lot of things to think about when you think about the trajectory of the site. Number one, the offices of Richland Operations Office and the Officer of Protection will be no more on the 1st of October. We're going to be the Hanford Field Office. It's going to be a new name. It's going to be one combined team. And I think that's a pivotal portion of our opportunity for us. And there's not a reorganization of our team to support that. We've organized already to be the Hanford Field Office. It's just a natural next step. That's exciting. Tank waste mission, we'll be vitrifying tank waste next year. The test bed initiative will be in our rearview mirror, and we'll be applying those lessons learned to the holistic agreement in the later part of the decade associated with the 22 tanks that we'll retrieve in SSS, SXX, and U. A-farm retrievals will be continuing. Evaporator operations will be back in service, and the high-level waste facility design and construction will be continuing. If you look at risk reduction, we'll be moving west of capsules into dry storage. If we look at, 100K will be cold and dark. 324 progressing towards cold and dark. Groundwater, another year, year 11 of going for 2 billion gallons. And we're really changing the way we talk, we incentivize the contractor to focus on mass removal rather than gallons treated, because I think it creates a more focused effort there. The transuranic program is ramping up to start shipments in 2028. And a stretch objective for us is we want to have the first shovel in the ground for Supercell 11 at the Environmental Restoration Disposal Facility to prepare for future demolition. Infrastructure, the North Loop's done and energized. The new water plant is going to be that close. And another stretch objective for next year, I want to have the shovels in the ground to build a new fire station closer to the 200 East, where it'll be closer to the waste treatment plant, and retire one of the older fire stations. We may or may not have the integrated tank disposition contract awarded. There's some news today. I haven't had a chance to read it or internalize it, but we have plans for whether that goes forward or not. Lots of changes in the federal government, changes in the state government. So, there's opportunities and challenges in those changes, and we'll look to capitalize on those opportunities. And then really, if you think about where we were just 5 years ago, 10 years ago, we've got things on the plate for 2025 that in some people may not have believed were even possible. that long ago, but we'll be doing them, and we'll be doing them all in parallel and progressing the mission of the site. So it's really an exciting time for that. We see the excitement in the workforce in our team when we're out there. And so as we think about to close the Hanford Advisory Board, continuing to focus on what I talked about in February is the board of the future, not the board of the past, and continuing to focus, just what you think about how you operate to really represent what we see as the value proposition that a Citizens Advisory Board can and should deliver in support of the mission. And again, I view that as a partnership exercise in general, but we've got to continue to focus forward and stop thinking about the past and what the HAB used to be, because it's not relevant anymore. What's relevant is the HAB of the future, aligned with the mission of the future, and I hope that we'll be able to get there together. With that, thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back to
Thank you. And before I move to questions, we'll be moving down the table. Stephanie.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me okay? All right, great. I do just want to check. I know the sun is facing this way. Is it in people's eyes? Do we need to close some shades?
I thought that was a sweat of foul.
Oh.
Unfortunately, these blinds are electric and they have locked us out of those controls. So
we can't.
we have to live with it.
Oh,
We
I'm
will-
sorry. That must be uncomfortable.
They can
Well,
enjoy
no,
the sunset while they enjoy the
People trying to look
presentation.
at us and it looks uncomfortable because they're looking directly into the sun, but that's okay. Sorry. Sorry about that. But I am excited to be here with you today in the beautiful city of Spokane to give an agency update on behalf of Washington State Department of Ecology. I'm Stephanie Schleif, the Nuclear Waste Program Manager, and I've been in the seat since March of this year. You go to the next slide for us, please. And you'll see that Brian and I are already in alignment because I'm covering a lot of the same topics that Brian spoke to you about. So that will help me make my presentation a little bit shorter. Talk about recruitment, outreach, and education, Hanford site funding, tri-party negotiations, those that have closed, those that are ongoing, our compliance activities across the site, and an update on our permitting efforts. Next slide, please. A little bit about recruitment. Really exciting news. Working in such a robust area such as the Tri-Cities where there are a lot of competitive jobs, you can imagine that sometimes trying to recruit for positions with the state can be challenging, but very excited to say that we've gone from a high of 31 vacancies in July of 2022 down to just 11 vacancies. We have 2 active recruitments that are out right now. There's a link there for those that are interested in any of our positions working for the state, or if you know anyone who is interested in working with the Department of Ecology. It is a really great place to work. I myself have been there. In November, it will be 11 years, and I started as an environmental specialist 3, came back and have worked my way up now to be the program manager. So there's a lot of diverse opportunities and a trajectory where you can continue to grow within the nuclear waste program. So like I said, we have 2 vacancies that are in active recruitment, 6 others in various stages of the hiring process. All of our positions we're moving into recruitment right now. We have a lot of work that's ongoing, and I'll talk to, in the presentation a little further on, a lot of our upcoming scope that we're working very hard on. And I know Department of Energy has the same challenge we do along with EPA. One of our biggest things that we're focusing on is knowledge transfer and institutional knowledge just across our program. We have some folks that have been with us decades that might be looking at retirement in the near future. So we're assessing how we can ensure their knowledge gets transferred to not just one person, but multiple folks, how we can create records of their institutional knowledge and keep those in perpetuity so we don't lose that incredible knowledge that we have within our program. Go to the next slide. I'm going to turn this over to Ana Grisel to talk about outreach and education for us.
So I am Ana Grisel Alvarez. I think some of you might know me, but I've been with the program for a little over 2 years now. The communications program really focuses a lot on outreach. In 2024 so far, we have offered 11 events and hosted these events, reaching more than 1,237 people. That is a lot of people. Our most recent events include the Return to the River Salmon Festival, Leadership Tri-Cities Hanford Day, Tijuana High School, Navarro Launch and Learn,
let's talk about Hanford pollinators. And in that, I want to stop 1 second and let you guys know about the Let's Talk About Hanford series that we started little bit after COVID because we couldn't really perform outreach in person. And so Ryan Miller, our manager in communications, decided to start this series online so that people could learn about Hanford virtually. And I think that's fantastic. We have covered anywhere, you know, from pollinators to sturgeon history. We have done Black history. We are having one soon about holidays at Hanford. So anyway, it's just a way for people to learn about what we do and we are all about. Another event that maybe Stephanie could talk a little bit more about was the Kazakhstan delegates visit that was actually last week. And yeah, just contact us if you would like to come, us to come talk to your organization. We do targeted presentations for schools, for college students, for community groups. So if that's in your radar and you would like for us to come present to you about Hanford, we would be very happy to do so.
Thank you, Anna Garcelle. And on the Kazakhstan visit, yes, we had a delegation reach out to us. About 4 officials had worked with the State Department to come out and were visiting various places. They did a tour of B-Reactor in the morning and were interested in talking to us more about the regulatory structure and framework that we use to clean up the Hanford site. So it was a pretty brief 1-hour visit that we coordinated through the governor's office to educate them on how we partner with Department of Energy and EPA to clean up the site and the history of the site as well. So taking us to the next slide. As I mentioned on the recruitment slide, we are expanding and we want to take the opportunity to just familiarize you with some faces that you will be seeing here supporting the Hanford Advisory Board. Many of you know Ryan Miller. He is our primary Hanford Advisory Board liaison for ecology. You might have also seen other board members here with our program communications team in other capacities when Ryan is pulled away for work, or in the case this week when he is in Ireland enjoying hopefully what is a wonderful vacation with his family. So I just want to take the opportunity to highlight some of our staff in the areas that you might see them supporting board engagements. Ana Grisel Alvarez is here. She's a communications consultant and she's supporting the board meeting today. She's been with Ecology, as she said, for 2 years, and she'll be mostly providing backup support on CARM subcommittee meetings. We also have Dana McFadden, who is our permit communications specialist. She's been with Ecology more than 17 years. Dana will be providing backup support to the TWIST community. And then the newest member of our communication team, who has joined us virtually, is Benjamin Pruitt. He is an outreach and education specialist, and it's a newly added position to our communications team. Ben is joining us from a 5-year stint at the outreach, social media, and volunteer coordinator for NOAA Grays Reef National Marine Sanctuary in Savannah, Georgia. Here at the HAB, Ben will be providing support to provide backup support for the full board meetings. And I think Ben was going to turn on his camera and maybe wave, but even if you can't see that because you're looking at the screen, we included a photo in the packet so you can identify him at future board meetings. Excellent. There's Ben. Hi, Ben. We also have a vacant community outreach and education specialist position that we're looking to fill. This was formerly filled by Ginger Wireman, who many of you probably worked with pretty closely. We're hoping to have that position filled in the next month or so, and that position will provide backup support for the LIDS committee. And then last but not least, and I won't say my favorite member of our communications team, but a very, very cute one, is the official ecology spokesdog, Maggie, who helps Ryan with outreach and education events. Though apparently I heard that she did submit an application to be the official mascot of the HAB. So I look forward to hearing how that works out. She is very, very cute. For folks who don't know, Maggie is one of Ryan's golden retrievers. All right. So next slide, you heard Brian speak a little bit about funding. Oh, there we go. Okay. Hopefully that makes it a little easier for folks to see everyone in the room. So I'm going to skip over some of this. As Brian said, it's been a really great trajectory where we've seen there being bumps up for the appropriated amount of spending for Hanford. In FY24, as Brian said, we received a record 3.04 budget for the site. That's an increase from 2.84 billion in FY23 and 2.7 in FY22. It is the result, as Brian said, of really great work that continues to happen on the site. It's also the result of many voices calling for the need for compliant budget at Hanford, for them to meet all of their obligations that is under the tri-party agreement, all of the milestones that we've agreed to that are a priority for the cleanup. And to that end, we are advocating for FY25's budget. As Brian said, we don't know what will shake out in a change of administration. The president's budget that was requested in the House budget are at 3.11 billion, which is big. Senate is at 3.35 billion, which is, again, a really great number. And it would not be without the support of many voices calling for the Hanford budget, saying that the site needs to get adequate funding for Department of Energy to meet all of their obligations, including the holistic agreement. And that transitions us into the next slide, which is a status for tri-party negotiations. Brian summarized some of this, and most of you are probably familiar that on April 29th in 2024, this year, we announced the holistic agreement. It was out for public comment from May 30th to September 1. That was a total of 90 days. We did a 30-day advance notice, so the public was able to look at it for, as Brian said, 120 days. We held meetings in Richland, Olympia, and Hood River. All of those were in person and virtual, as Brian said. We are now going through as tri-parties with EPA and Department of Energy to review all of the comments that we received and to draft responses. And there will be one response to comments document that we will issue on behalf of the tri-party agencies for that. Also just mentioned, we did hold consultation with the Yakama Nation. Brian spoke about that. That took place on September 4th. We also have another negotiation that is ongoing, and I imagine Dave will probably also speak to. The tri-parties are updating soil, groundwater, and facility milestones, which are currently held in abeyance. Next slide. Tank T101, again, Brian spoke about T101. Energy formally notified Ecology on August 15th that the single shell tank T101 has been declared an assumed leaker and is likely to be actively leaking. We are working with Department of Energy to determine appropriate leak response plans. And for Ecology, what that means is, as Brian referred to, we have an existing agreed order that covers 2 other actively leaking tanks out on site. Those are B109 and T111. And we're going through and we're very early in the process, but having conversations with the Department of Energy about revising that agreed order to include interim actions to respond to this additional leaking tank. There is a leak response plan that we're also working with the Department of Energy on now for all of the single shell tanks that will go into our Hanford site-wide dangerous waste Rev 9 permit that will be going out for public comment that I'll also talk about later in my presentation. And I'll also just highlight something Brian said, that based on the current information, Ecology does not believe the tank poses immediate risk to workers or the public. But that said, any leaking tank is a big deal, which is why we're talking with Department of Energy about new interim actions and final actions to respond to the tank. Next slide. So for those folks familiar with Ecology's presentation, we usually provide you an update on where we're at for our compliance activities for the site. As a regulator of the site, as an authorized program to enforce Resource Conservation Recovery Act, that means that any area out on the Hanford site that stores, treats, or disposes of dangerous waste is covered under a permit or has a Washington administrative code that says how the waste needs to be managed. We have a team of compliance inspectors, between 4 and 5 compliance inspectors, that go out and inspect each of those areas against either a permit or Washington administrative code requirements. And once they do inspections, they will issue a report. And each of those reports will say whether their inspection identified areas of concern or any non-compliances associated with the area that Department of Energy needs to correct. Here are the reports from May of 2024 to July that we issued, and they are hyperlinked if you want to go out and take a look at those. All of them are placed in the Hanford administrative record as well. Next slide. I spoke to this just a little bit. So here are upcoming inspections that we will be conducting in May from May of 2024 to August. And these will also have reports that we will issue after we conduct the inspections. So anticipate at one of the upcoming advisory boards, you'll see links to those reports. Next slide. Upcoming opportunities for public comment, some of which are open now. We have a Class 2 permit modification for low-activity waste pretreatment system, or LOPS for hose and hose transfer lines, and that's a life extension that ends September 20th. And all of these, I should also say, all of these are out on our website as well. We have a web page for any public comment that is open, as well as any of the documentation to comment on. A Newcon research development demonstration permit for the construction and operation of a thermal oxidation system for SSTs. That is out for public comment right now through October 10th. We will have a Class 2 permit modification for low activity waste pretreatment system, again, LOPS for the tank size cesium removal system, and that's for mechanical issues. A Class 2, again, for the waste treatment and immobilization plant to add an existing room for the low activity waste vitrification facility. That permit public comment period is still to be scheduled. And then, while not associated directly with Hanford, they do accept a lot of Hanford waste for treatment. That is the Permafix Northwest facility located in Richland. The draft of their renewal will go out for public comment in late January of next year, 2025. And I'll also just mention, when I say a Class 2 permit modification, the classification of permit tells you the length of time something will go out for public comment, and a Class 2 permit modification will have a 45-day comment period. Next slide. So, status of the Hanford site-wide dangerous waste permit. Folks have heard us talk about the 120-day public comment period. It's planned and scheduled to happen in early 2025. When we get closer to finalizing all of the unit groups that will be going into that permit, we'll provide early notification of the public comment period dates. My team has been working very hard on completing all of the work associated with that renewal and getting it out for public comment. We do anticipate that in October of this year, we'll know what month next year that permit will be going out for public comment. Excuse me. Briefly, what the permit will include, it will include 53 different operating closure and post-closure unit groups, 2 corrective action unit groups, and then the permit itself will also have standard conditions, attachments, and supporting documents that will go out for public comment. It will be about 20,000 pages. And right now our status is we're complete with 30 unit groups. So as you can see, we continue to make really great progress. And I also just want to say, really appreciate Brian and his team Department of Energy. They've been working really closely with us to address all of our comments on that permit so we can get it ready for public comment. So we're very, very close. And I think that will take us to the next slide, which is just acronyms. I think we did pretty good in trying not to use acronyms throughout our presentation, but just in case, hopefully you find that helpful. And then we're on to questions, and I'll turn it back over to facilitator.
And before questions, we'll give Dave an opportunity to speak. Go ahead.
Well, thank you, everybody. Welcome. Good evening. Don't have a presentation, which is kind of par for my course. There's a couple things that Brian mentioned that I wanted to kind of highlight. One is I really want to give his team credit and kudos for getting the K-West fuel storage basin emptied of water and grouted. For a while there, Brian, it seemed like if you didn't have bad luck, you wouldn't have had any luck at all on the dewatering, but it finally all came together and it went fast, and congratulations. And like you said, it's grouted and that, it'll be a little bit safer to keep now for, obviously there's a lot of still more work to go. And they are doing continuing remediation work, Brian's got a big mission, a lot of things to cover, and he didn't really highlight all like the soil remediation work and some of the other demolition work that's going on around K, but it is going well. And again, his team deserves a lot of credit for that. We are in the process of reviewing we got the draft proposed plan for 100K. Hopefully looking at public comment next spring, early spring. There's a little wrinkle that EPA other parts of my agency have thrown into the mix. One of the significant contaminants around the Hunt areas isn't just the radionuclides, it's the hexavalent chrome. And in August, EPA published a cancer slope factor for hexavalent chrome, which none of us were expecting. We knew they were working on it, but none of us were expecting it. So we're having to figure out what that means. And it's a very low level, and it's for ingestion. So more to come on that. We don't know where that's going yet. And as Stephanie mentioned, we are continuing to work on the RIFS, the investigation milestones, characterization milestones, the remediation milestones of both soil and buildings, those that have been in abeyance, having good conversations, and we're still trying to figure out exactly what the final package is going to look like. But obviously we'll share more when we know more. And I think in terms of, I think you knew that we added a new staff member in end of February, Cass Galasso. But also folks probably, I think it was in the HAB happenings, but Craig Cameron, who has been with us for a long time, is retiring at the end of the month. So that's a big loss for us. But I think with that, I think I can wrap up.
All right. Thank you, everyone. We will open for board questions. Who would like to lead us off? Dan.
Just a comment. I know, Brian, you're going to say I'm just a broken record, but the $2.70 billion in October of 2021 would be in October 2023, that would be 3.00 billion. So these numbers are actually not much of an increase in your buying power. And so I would love to see some appropriate inflationary adjustment of those kind of budget figures. I just did the, Bureau of Labor Statistics urban CPI adjustment, which is, who knows if that's any good, but the point is their dollars are not constant like feet or pounds, or they're a stretchy unit. So I'd appreciate seeing that, the inflationally adjusted budgets.
We'll have Richard and then Max. Richard.
I just want to comment that to Brian, it is a very good report. You had a good run this past quarter or so. But I do look at the control room operators looking at the monitors, and that's certainly, it was a flashback to the initial criticality at FFTF, and those control rooms don't look anything like it. So a bunch of people looking at a computer screen, it's just has no spin to it. But I do want to congratulate you on a good run. I hope it doesn't jinx you for the next quarter.
No, I appreciate that. And part of what we're all dealing with is, as Stephanie's recruiting, we're, recruiting. There's been a big workforce changeover. And the unique aspect about the waste treatment plant is no one's ever done what we do every day there before. It's a one-of-a-kind, first-of-a-kind plant. Every step we take in the commissioning process is like walking on Mars. No one's ever been there before. And so we're using every step to identify there are material issues that we work through. There are troubleshooting actions we have to take. The commissioning process is incredibly complex, working through all the systems that you would expect it to be. And when we find something, the Bechtel team has really done a phenomenal job of using every opportunity to learn, to teach, to update procedures, make sure all the crews learn what that one crew learned, and then take the next step. And that ability to being agile and flexible in operating a facility like that is a key to future success. Our aim point is not cold commissioning or hot commissioning, it's future operations and excellence in future operations. And I think, the momentum that we've built is important, and we'll continue to focus on that. Everyone just has to recognize that we're doing things that no one's ever done before, and our team is doing a phenomenal job every single day to make that happen. And so we certainly recognize that. We appreciate the broader Hanford team, the 13,000 badged employees, all embracing a new future with us. That's where the power of the site resides, with getting everyone aligned and working together. And I think we're seeing a lot of that kind of come into play now. So we're excited about where we are.
Max.
Well, speaking of future events, Brian, I wonder if you could speak a little bit to, so I was on site last week and echo what colleagues have said, great progress. Could you speak a little bit to high-level waste treatment and what's ongoing at the high-level waste treatment facility right now, and what sort of major upcoming milestones are happening with that facility?
Yeah, certainly. So the right now it's really working to lay out the design plan from where we are today to get reach 90% design for all the systems by the end of 2027. In the background, there's work with Bechtel applying lessons learned from direct feed low activity waste. We have a number of routine reviews right now, actually this week. We have a project peer review and independent cost review on the site, working with Matt Irwin and his team to kind of analyze the current state of play. And that will be factored into a contract that we'll let with Bechtel for the high-level waste design phase. And from a programmatic perspective, in the background, we have the critical decision process 413 that the department exercises for major capital projects. Our goal is to have the CD23 decision, which is the transition into construction in 2028, with the design phase complete. And with the facility, the work going on is, I'll say, structural activities like putting in shield doors, things like that. The things that have to come over the top, there's between 50 and 60 over the top construction activities that have to occur that are not impacted by the design progression, so that then we can weather the facility in, if not by the end of 27, in early 28. And so when we get that decision to go into full construction, we'll be ready to move forward. And with that, the team will grow slowly. The construction team will grow slowly. We're really focused now on building the engineering team to ramp up that part of it. And then from a financial perspective, we're working with the department, and obviously when you fund a major capital project like this, there's a lot of front end funding to create a profile that's sustainable. So we're working closely with Congress now to achieve that profile. So all those things together are placing the high level waste facility on a trajectory really that is informed by challenges of the past, that we think is success oriented, reduces our risk from a cost and schedule perspective, and puts us on track. As Andy Fitz has talked about, we want to be in a position in the mid 2030s to be operating the high level waste facility in a direct feed mode. And I think it's easy for me to say we're going to get there today. We're pretty far out, but all the work we're doing now, the key to a project of this size is in the first 10 or 15% of the time you put into it. And we're sort of in the middle of that process because we built the facility and design and stopped in 2012. And so now we're restarting again. Now is the time for us to be aggressive, to get off to a fast start, because if you get behind in a large project like this, you never catch up. And so our team, Bechtel, working with the department, and really Bechtel outreach through their enterprise, bringing in expertise to help us with that. I think we're in a really good place for a really positive start to retell the waste treatment plant story in the future as a different outcome than people have perceived it in the past.
All right, so we'll have Pam and then Chris. Pam.
Thank you for your presentations. They're very encouraging. For me, the news about WESF is particularly encouraging because that facility really posed one of the last serious risks to the region, and getting those capsules in dry storage is very exciting. I appreciate how well you guys are working together. Encouraged by the progress on the permit. It's been a long haul, and you're getting towards the end of it. So great presentations, and we're going to miss Craig. Thank you.
And Chris, go ahead.
Thank you. This is a question for EPA. So Dave, the hexavalent chromium.
So
document-
Chris, I do see your mute is off, but we're not hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Chris, would you like to type your question in the chat and we can relay it on your behalf?
Okay. My microphone is on.
I see a shrug. We'll see how that works. In the meantime, we'll go to Tim and then Max again.
So Brian, you mentioned what October 1st, RL and Office of River Protection merge back into one. Are you going to find efficiencies and budget opportunities there? Or is it a notable savings with the $3 million budget?
Well,
Billion.
it's a good question. I would think as we think about the way ahead as a single field office, we're already seeing the benefits of a unified DOE team as the customer. We're always looking for opportunities for efficiencies to be brought into the process. I don't think we're going to see any epiphanies in the near term. But I think if you think about where we were just a few years ago, we rationalized over 700 procedures between Richland and ORP into one set of 300. We have reorganized to eliminate functional overlap between the two teams. We've moved last year, we moved about 300 of my 500 staff, because 315 feds plus about 200 support contractors. We realigned everybody into work areas in buildings where they actually can talk together when they're in the facility and enhance the efficiencies there. And I meet with the contractor presidents individually and collectively multiple times per month. And we're always talking about where can we identify ways to do things a little bit more efficiently, put those dollars back into cleanup. Our contractors are committed to that. They're incentivized to it in their contracts, but more importantly, as a team, we're always looking for those opportunities because we can do more with more dollars placed into the cleanup effort. And we're always looking for those. Now, if there's no magic formula that we're going to, call it on the second of October and, raise a wand and money falls out of trees or anything like that. And what we're really trying to do is get everybody to see the Hanford site as a decades-long mission, not a decades-long mission broken into 4-year chunks, because we cannot keep changing course over time as we have done in the past and multiple times as administration change. We've got to focus on the way we're going forward now. We're looking for technology opportunities, but again, there's nothing magical in that world. And what looks good on paper usually takes years to field. And we're trying to factor those things in with a broader strategic plan from a T&D perspective that headquarters manages at the macro level. We still have our local R&D efforts as well, but to bring those capabilities to bear at the right time in the progression of each of the projects to deliver the benefits that we see that new technology might build. But again, stay in the course, staying consistent, feathering in opportunities when they present themselves when it makes sense for us to do that. We're not a R&D organization. We're I'll say a technology adaptation organization. We want to take technologies that are proven in other places that are robust and bring them into what we do and tailor them for that work. But we're not going to be leading edge on any of that stuff because usually leading edge stuff is pretty fragile. And what we need is stuff that can take a beating. So that's sort of the broader picture. It never stops, and we're always looking for that. But I won't tell you that we're going to see any major efficiencies in the transition. We'll just continue to work it as a part of our natural business.
And we'll have Max and then Steve. Max, go ahead.
Thanks again. Stephanie, in your presentation, you have a bullet about consultations with the Yakama Nation on the TPA. Are consultations also ongoing with the other tribes?
Yeah, so Brian spoke about that. So the Yakimas sent us a letter. We issued letters to all of the tribes that have treaty rights associated with the Hanford site. The Yakimas sent us a letter responding to that and wanted to do consultation with us. That's the one that we held on September 4th, as well as we received comments from them. And we have received a letter requesting consultation from the Nez Perce as well. And that's, Brian spoke to that, and that's the one we're still trying to get scheduled. We did not receive a request for consultation from Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla. We did get comments from each of the tribes. Anything, Brian, that you want to add to that?
Not right.
Okay.
First off, I just want to congratulate the efforts that have gone into being transparent and getting these very important elements of success out to people. I hope it's goes well beyond us in the community. But you did mention, Brian, a little bit about the big hurdle with grouting the basin. I just wondered, are there tanks we're looking to grout as well? And at what point would we be using that tool to help stabilize waste containers?
Can you repeat the last part?
Yeah, just we're using grout to stabilize the basin, and you finish that, which is a great milestone for us. How might that apply to tanks as we move that forward in terms of stabilizing the tanks themselves as opposed to?
Yeah, the tank closure process, we still have some work to do with the state. We'll submit a tank closure plan and work with the state on how that eventually is executed. That's a little bit early, I'd say premature to talk about that. On the other side, I love grout. We've used grout in a lot of places very effectively. You know, after we had the Purex tunnel partial collapse and we grouted those two tunnels, we did an evaluation across the site of other underground structures that could have a similar risk. And there were 3 out in the footprint around the plutonium finishing plant that represented a very similar risk. And so we went and grouted 2 of the 3. The third was small. The riser had a material condition that was impossible to open, so we couldn't get into it. And so our engineers went and sharpened their pencils and did a calculation to recognize and basically identified the fact that there was more overburden over that tank than originally expected. And so if the tank does collapse, it will not create an exchange with the air. So that was, you know, Hanford is one of those places where you either manage the site or the site manages you. And so we're really looking at every opportunity when we learn something, I'll say maybe the hard way, to look a broader extended condition to make sure that we're not going to be surprised by something similar in the future. And so that stabilization of those 3 tanks in that time frame really did reflect that learning, and we'll just continue to do the same thing. And grout, you know, if you look at the landscape of the site and you can see how it's kind of playing across with the holistic agreement, we'll be delivering low activity waste vitrification next year and optimizing low activity tank waste vitrification in the East Farms. We have the test bed initiative that's going to show the path to grout and ship waste in the West Farms really by the end of the decade with the 22 tanks in S, SX, and U that we'll retrieve out there. We're going to put the cross-site transfer line back into service later in the decade, early 2030s, to provide a little bit of flexibility for the Super 8 line. So the slurry line will follow that. And we're going to have the high-level waste facility ramping up to operations in 2030. So in the 2030s, we'll be vitrifying low activity and waste in the East Farms. We'll be vitrifying high-level waste in the East Farms. We'll be retrieving, treating, and grouting and shipping waste out of the state in the West Farms. And so when you look at that picture of that, that's real mission acceleration. And the work over the last several years, the work with the state and EPA through the holistic agreement, kind of put all those pieces into place that now, you know, we'll be able to really drive that tank waste mission, which is the critical path to future closure, 2070s, 2080s, whenever that we're able to achieve that path is set now, which is really exciting for us. Got to continue to do tank integrity, address other issues, but the power of the agreement, I think, was reflected by that T101 findings, right? We have a path forward. The tanks are old. That was one of the original tanks on the site. And it may happen in the not too distant future that we'll have another leaking tank. But staying the course on what we have put in place with the state, being mindful of those things that we find and appropriately responding when we need to manage the risk profile. We are in the next chapter of the Hanford cleanup, and that's the tank waste mission, and that's really exciting.
Yeah, well, thank you for that. And also, I would just encourage the transparency elements as often and as frequent, even if they are maybe a bit political to manage. I think it's always good to get those reality notes out to folks. And also, I do want to say thank you for saying excellent in future operations. I think the key element for everybody to be aware of is each of these things that we have success, each of the projects that we undertake is just getting us to an improvement path for how we continue to do work. So, and thanks for everybody working together, and kudos.
Thank you.
Larry.
I'm looking, I read through the 2024-2034 document issued by Energy. And when it got to the Hanford section, it stated that building on success, DOE, EPA, and the state of Washington reached a conceptual agreement on safe and viable path forward. Now, we've had multiple discussions about the recent agreement, and I was just wondering what your concept was of moving forward with that agreement. And I could probably ask the same thing from ecology. That was one question, and a short follow-up question. What is the what's the status of monitoring tanks?
I'll start with the second one first, since that's maybe the simpler response, but we do have a very robust tank integrity program. We look at the structural soundness of other tanks, and then really the double shell tanks is more about corrosion management, corrosion control, so chemistry control in those tanks. There's an ongoing visual process for tank inspections. In single shell tanks, it's usually through the riser and down into the tank to see if we see any changes there. Double shell includes some of the work underneath the tank and the refractory to make sure that we don't see any surprises in the underground portion of it or the outside of the inner tank. And we have an independent tank integrity panel that we present the findings to routinely as a means of ensuring that we are doing everything we can to manage the longevity of the tanks, in my view, long enough to get the tanks retrieved and get the tank waste treated and dispositioned. So from that perspective, I think we have a very robust program, and certainly engage with PNNL and other really smart folks. When I walk into that room, I think the IQ probably goes down a little bit, but that's okay because we want those folks to be really the top-notch folks. Relative to the broader question about the way ahead on the tank waste mission, you want to start with that one?
Sure. So I think that document was the DOE strategic vision document.
Oh,
I
is that what
think
you're talking about?
The 2024-2034 document.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that's mine then.
I just wanted to point out that's your vision. But I can talk about, I think what they were talking about, the conceptual agreement and for the path ahead for tank waste was the holistic agreement that I spoke about and covered on, my slides aren't numbered, on one of my slides, where we completed public comment on that September 1st. And now we have all of the comments from everyone that commented on the tri-party agreement changes, the changes to the consent decree. We're actively meeting with Department of Energy and EPA to review all of those comments that we received to see whether any of those comments will require us to make changes to any of what went out for public comment. And then we will issue a response to comment before then finalizing the changes. And I know our goal is to try and have all of that done this calendar year. Brian, anything that you?
No, that's exactly right. And at the macro level, really, the goal was to achieve something that we think puts the tank waste mission on a affordable, achievable way ahead for the next 15 years. which I think is important. We tried to keep the time horizon of the agreement into the 2040 timeframe because frankly, anything beyond that's funny money anyway. It's hard to predict what several administrations in the future are going to do and what may change between now and then that would change the approach we take in any way. But I'm really pleased, and I know, our team was really pleased with the collaboration. You can't spend 100 negotiating sessions with a group of people and not come away with a better appreciation of everyone's perspective, or you've killed each other, right? And so we got the former, which was great. And so that relationship and that bonding and the alignment and the mutual understanding of what we're working together to achieve, I think is going to be powerful for years to come.
Speaking of public comment, we have a hard stop for public comment in about 4 minutes. And in this final stretch, this would be the time we would normally open it up for alternates questions. However, I do not believe we have any more alternates in attendance. So there was a short conversation in chat. Chris, would you like to relay what your question was? We should be ready to hear you this time.
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now. Thank you.
I wanted to know from Dave if the hexavalent chromium document that he referred to could likely result in lower cleanup levels, at least for groundwater entering the Columbia River. And he said no. It would imply to the risk for human ingestion of hexavalent chromium. So it would likely be for groundwater that could be drunk more on the Central Plateau, not necessarily entering the river, or it could affect salmon redds. But there's a lot of work that needs to be done to know how to know what to do with that in the future. So that was Dave's response to my question.
Are there any final questions? Not seeing any in the room, not seeing any online. Looking towards public comment, we do not have anyone signed up in the room online, but I do want to check to see if there is anybody online to give public comment. And raise your hand or enter something in the chat in Teams. And it looks like that answer is no. All right, so we are about 15 minutes ahead of the agenda. How would you like to proceed? The answer is break. And our presenter is here. Will you be ready to present at 7? Okay, break to 7.
All right, thank you, Brian, Stephanie, and Dave.
Thank you.
All right, we're at 7 o'clock. You can begin whenever you're ready.
All right, for those of you that don't know me, I'm Dwayne Carter, Environmental Compliance Division. I've been in Hanford for 9 years. Prior to that, I spent 14 years at the Umatilla Chemical Agent Disposal Facility. And people affectionately call it that the incinerator. There were actually 4 incinerators down there. And I closed that in January 2015. So we're here to talk about per and polyfluoroalkyl substances. 6 years ago, I could not pronounce that. The EP rules and the effects on Hanford. Next slide. Per and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, I'll call it PFAS the rest of the day, are man-made chemicals that have been used in industry and consumer products worldwide. And this says the 40s, but it's actually into the 30s when DuPont invented it, and the first one being Teflon. They're used to make non-stick cookware, water repellent clothing, stain resistant fabrics, and carpets, some cosmetics, some firefighting foams, and you'll hear those called aqueous film forming foams, and products that resist grease, oil, and water. They're basically in just about everything. During production and use, PFAS can migrate into the soil, water, and air. Most PFAS do not break down, so they remain in the environment. Some PFAS can build up in people and animal with repeated exposure over time. So what makes PFAS forever chemicals is the carbon-fluorine bond. It's virtually unbreakable, except by high temperature incineration. PNNL, Pacific Northwest National Labs, has been doing a lot of research on different methods for treating it. So we are working at it on Hanford, and I might also add that the Pacific Northwest Site Office, which oversees PNNL, is doing a separate PFAS assessment for their facilities. So we have the two field offices that will combine, which is an office and Office of River Protection. We're doing our own roadmap and site-specific assessment, and PNSO is doing their own too. But I work with PNSO and they provide me all their data and I provide them our data. So we are still working as one Hanford. Next slide. So the EPA rule, public water systems must monitor for PFAS and have 3 years to complete initial monitoring by 2027, followed by ongoing compliance monitoring. Water systems must also provide the public with information on the level of PFAS in their drinking water beginning in 2027. Public water systems have 5 years by 2029 to implement solutions that reduce PFAS if monitoring shows that drinking water levels exceed maximum contaminant level. Beginning in 5 years, 2029, public water systems that have PFAS in drinking water that violate one or more maximum contaminant levels must take action to reduce the PFAS levels and provide public notification. Next slide. So our current quality assurance document called the Hanford Analytical Services Quality Assurance Requirement Document, HASGARD, does not include PFAS sampling protocols, only laboratory analysis requirements. So we're currently working to get an update or add an appendix that includes PFAS in the HASGARD. It's like a 3-volume document, so it's pretty big. We don't want to have to go in and rewrite the whole thing. Once we get that in there, we can issue direction to our contractors to develop their own sampling protocols. So site contractors, HMITs, and CPCCO sampled site groundwater sources and drinking water supplies on December 11, 2019, and that would be the 400 area where the fast flux test facility is, and that's a groundwater source. That's our only groundwater source that's for drinking water. Then in December 14, 2022, we sent and January 25, 2023, we sampled all 3 drinking water sources, and that would be the 100 area, that's the one in the K Basin, the 200 West area, and you saw the new facility going in to replace the 1943 facility on Brian Vance's slide. And all those were non-detect. So both sampling events. This year, we started sampling 200 West, since that's our biggest drinking water source. It supplies most of the site on the Central Plateau under the UCMR. That stands for Unregulated Contaminated Monitoring Rule 5, and this comes out of direction from EPA of Ohio, and it's the groundwater and drinking water group. Under that source, under that sampling event, 200 West came back non-detect again. And of note is we used Hanford sampling used the 537.1, the EPA used the 533. They're equivalent. 533 you can check for more contaminants, but that's just a note. Still non-detect. So what have we been doing? First off, in December 22, we completed the Hanford specific roadmap. And if you can go to DOE's website, you can pull up the DOE roadmap that is basically the template for that. And I did provide that to Ecology and EPA once we got it cleared. So a part of that was the drinking water. We have pillars that we have to go off of. And all, like I said, that was all non-detect. Our contractor researched 148,000 records for use of PFAS at DOE sites, and approximately 1,000 records were deemed significant. So Hanford's a 580 square mile site. What we looked for was sites that could have potential impacts with PFAS. So what we found was the 100 and 200 area fire stations, B plant, Environmental Restoration Disposal Facility, ERDF, Effluent Treatment Facility, ETF, and Plutonium Uranium Extraction Plant, Purex, and the use of PFAS in certain atmospheric and groundwater studies by the Pacific Northwest National Labs. I'm not as versed on that one because that just came up like last week. And for those sites I just identified, we are building conceptual site models. The models will be included in a preliminary assessment report currently being drafted, and we're looking for hopefully in the next month, maybe October, that be in draft form. We'll go through tech editing and then go through the clearance process and get it out to EPA and ecology, and the tribes, or Yakima Nation specifically, is interested in looking at that. But this will just be a site-specific assessment that we'll have to put down to the contractors so they stay consistent, and then they can develop their sampling and analysis plans in QAP. So based on preliminary assessment report, a sample strategy document will be developed in fiscal year 2025. Sampling of relevant environmental media will be collected at the beginning of 2026 to confirm the presence or absence of PFAS at Hanford locations where high volumes of PFAS. Now, I've been working across the complex with national labs and the other sites, but one place that's pretty much ahead and on the forefront of PFAS sampling is the Michigan State Department of Environmental, Great Lakes, and Energy. They just developed and published the PFAS sampling guide this year, and we've looked at it. We've provided it to our contractors. It's a 31-page document that goes through all the personal protective equipment that you can use, all the different sampling equipment you can use, the different kinds of insecticides and sunscreen you can use. And it goes down to the different type sampling techniques. That guide is online, and I have a hard copy here, but like I said, giving it to our contractors to give them a starting point and not have to reinvent the wheel. Because we could spend millions of dollars writing in our own sampling guidance when we already have one out there that's by an approved state. So as I indicated, Hanford has tested drinking water from all sources for the site workers with no PFAS detected. And in some places, we do provide bottled water where the piping's not up to standard. The historical uses of PFAS at Hanford have been researched, and the results are forthcoming. Focus site sampling is being planned to collect soil and groundwater samples from locations where PFAS is most likely present based on the research performed, and that would be those specific sites: B plant, Purex, ERDF, ETF, 100 and 200 area fire stations. So that's all I have. I want to
Yes, before we move to board questions, we'd like to give each of the regulators a chance to provide perspectives, beginning with ecology. Who do we have available?
definitely.
Good evening. My name is Alicia Boyd.
Oh, yes. Hey, Elisa.
Hey. Good to hear from you, Dwayne.
Good.
Thanks for having this topic on the agenda today, guys, because PFAS contamination is a huge concern across both Washington State and the country right now. It's a really important topic. They're not new chemicals, but there are thousands of chemicals that fall under that PFAS umbrella, and the human health effects of those thousands of chemicals, some of that is new science, new information, and both the human health effects and then the regulations concerning PFAS chemicals. They're being updated very actively on the state and the federal level right now. I would say warp speed for federal regulation updates from what I've seen. The EPA drinking water standard that Dwayne was talking about, it's one of several federal rules that have been updated recently, but there are others and there are state rules that are being updated. We're very pleased to have been able to work as tri-parties together. We've been coordinating together on these emerging contaminants. And to be perfectly honest, we're really looking forward to being able to work on the future sampling plans that'll come out in the future and to see where we're going to go from that. But DOE's already been doing the record searches and checking on the drinking water of the workers, and that's good progress. So that's what I had to say. Thanks.
Thank you. And EPA.
Yeah, again, thank you. And glad to have this presentation, Dwayne. And we are, like Alicia said, I'm looking forward to going back and reviewing the report of the records review and the sites of interest. And again, just working with the department on moving this forward. The good news is I don't think that there's, there was one state I want to hear about, where lots of PFAS may have been disposed. I don't think compared to some places, we had lots of PFAS. We definitely had some, right? We're going to find it. But thankfully, we don't have some of the levels that some other places are worried about. So it's good that we're looking at this and it's appropriate, but and the levels that we're finding that are levels for health concerns, like Alicia mentioned, are really low. But we have a process for this. We know how to deal with emerging contaminants, and that's what we're going to do. And just appreciate the stepwise and methodical way of going about it. As you mentioned, Dwayne, some of the other wrinkles about those low levels is you have to be very careful when you sample. People, aquatic toxicologists know that like cadmium is very sensitive for freshwater critters. There's makeups and everything else that you cannot have or when you do water samples, and PFAS can be like that. So appreciate again, being methodical and being in a place where we're not going to get false positives and be able to tell what's there versus what's not. So thank you.
All right, thank you. I didn't see the order the tents went up. I did see the last one. So we're going to go starting from Steve around to Pam. Steve, go ahead.
Well, thanks for bringing it up. I do appreciate it. Yeah, scary stuff. Related to the Michigan PFAS standards, how long have they been in adoption, and what really pushed them to being so far ahead of the rest of the country?
Call me Mike. Because as you know, Michigan has a strong industrial base back in the days, especially when PFAS was really prevalent. But so they started doing biota samples, fauna samples, soil sample, surface water samples years ago. Matter of fact, they had a seminar last year that I was going to go to, but I missed it. But just go on their website and you can find a lot of good stuff. And there's some good stuff out from it. DOE has a website for PFAS. It's a public website that has the roadmap that DOE put out that all the sites across the compact use as a template. And yeah, but like I said, Michigan probably on the, like I said, forefront, and they've been doing it for a while. That's because they're a large industrial base.
And then I guess I had one other question related to the international interest and how well are we coordinating and how are other countries dealing with it?
They're working it out with their standards. They're not using like ours. They're using ASTM standards, but all the other countries do have some program for PFAS, except for maybe like the underdeveloped countries. But just to go a bit further, sampling has been done in Antarctica and they found it. The Tibetan Plateau in China, they found it. So it's being found everywhere.
Yeah.
And especially, up here, you all know about, the airport. The airport Spokane Airport just received, Ecology just released its assessment in August for PFAS at the airport. So that's online right now. And then you have your Air Force Base. So, and the way they used to test those hangars was once they get the system installed, they would flood it and just wash it out. Go down the storm drain. So.
Concentrate in the soil, right? Okay. Thanks.
We'll have Rob and then Dan.
Two questions. Why is PFAS dangerous to humans? What does it do?
It bioaccumulates in different diet sources. It bioaccumulates in humans, and
But I mean, is it a carcinogen or what does it do? Make it sterile? I don't know.
I just know it bioaccumulates. I don't think they have. There's a lot of studies out there that I haven't gone through. Like I said, 6 years ago, I couldn't pronounce pure polyfluoroalkyl substances, and there's still more stuff coming out on them.
Okay.
Like Alicia mentioned, there's a lot of the toxicology is always evolving. New information's coming out. I do know there's birth weight issues, there's cholesterol issues, it's a potential carcinogen. There's a whole bunch of things, but we're still learning. It's still evolving.
Okay. The other question I have is on the Hanford site. Where does PFAS come from?
So each one of the canyons, B plant, Purex, T plant, and Redox, all of their glove boxes had aqueous film forming foam, which is PFAS based. And when they shut those canyons down, basically they just rinsed it out in the unlined ponds, cribs, or ditches. Now, Hammer, you would suspect, that's our training facility that has the fire tower and all the different training models. They used a non-PFAS aqueous film forming foam. So we're still going to test Hammer at their storm retention pond. So if it accumulates anywhere and they had it, it would go in that storm retention pond.
Are there any future restrictions on the use of that type of firefighting foam then?
Yes, it has not been in the Hanford chemical inventory since 2018.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Dan and then Larry.
I had a question about how you measure PFAS. Are these laboratory measurements or can you make field measurements? How do you tell the different ones apart? And how much does it cost to make a measurement?
It's going to cost a lot, but the laboratory measurements, what I mentioned under EPA SW 846-537.1, this is for drinking water. That's the only thing we sampled at Hanford so far. And EPA SW 846-533. Those are the two methods that have been used at Hanford, and the levels are extremely low, down to parts per trillion. And that blows my mind because parts per million is, hard enough to get to. And then you go to parts per billion, now at parts per trillion, and we're talking 4 to 7 parts per trillion. So that's how it's all laboratory methods. There's no screening. There's a laboratory screening method that was approved earlier this year, and that was EPA SW 846-1621. And then we finally got the methodology EPA SW 846-1633, where we can sample the soils. We did not have an approved soil sampling methodology, and there's like 8 different media you can sample under 1633 to include leachate from our landfills, surface water, wastewater, animals, soil, waste solids. So yeah, that's what we've really been waiting on to sit down and finalize our HAZGARD and our site investigation method and get to our contractors under contract direction to start their sampling and analysis plans. And it would mainly be CPC-CO and WRPS right now.
Larry.
Dwayne, thanks a lot for the presentation. That it's an important subject and the timing is kind of critical. First, kind of a comment. When I was a nerd kid back in 1962, I checked a book of poisons out from the library. I think I was going to do my parents in or something. And one of the 10 most hazardous industrial chemicals back then was Teflon decomposition products. So we knew about it 50 years ago or 60 years ago now. Rob stole part of my question, but as to where PFFAs come from, what's coming into Hanford that potentially has PFFAs? And are we ever going to have to check materials coming in, or do we just ask people to comply, or what's your take on that?
As I mentioned, we maintain a chemical inventory system, and we've tried to keep PFAS offsite since 2018. Now, it's like I said, it's in everything. So it might be in one of our insecticides we use. It might be in a lube oil. It might be on your waterproof shoes that the operators wear, or waterproof jackets. So it's everywhere, and it's hard to restrict, especially when it's coming from your operators or maintenance house engineers, personally owned equipment. But as far as our chemical inventory, we haven't had a stock of it since 2018.
So are you going to continue to monitor to see if levels go up, which would be an indicator of something sneaking in or something that you haven't discovered?
Well, we'll continue monitoring drinking water. That's as mandated. But we will, once we get this site investigative plan out to our contractors, we will start monitor, or at least seeing where we have PFAS. And like I said, those units I mentioned earlier, we'll do site models for and sample them. But best we can do is, maintain our chemical inventory and do the sampling once we get our contractors up to speed.
Richard and then Pam.
I guess I'm very knowledgeable of 400 area water supply since I used to be cognizant engineer for it. So you had a test of the water, one test or three tests? There are three wells. And the other thing is that that water is actually from the 200 area. And we historically, the tritium level in the wells was always an issue. Each well had a different depth where it was pulling the water off, and some were higher, some were lower than drinking water standards. We used to blend them, but in order to get it down to drinking water standard. But also on your list, FFTF had a AFFF system as well in the bowels of the plant. That was one of my other jobs, to pump out that water that was accumulated down there. All foamy it was, but it wasn't very much. It was a small tank. It only went off once in its lifetime. But you didn't have any AFFF use in the 300 area. Kennewick has recently had the PFAS detection in their water coming in, and knowing historically the methodologies in 300 area and the 300 area process trench, I would have thought that maybe you would be looking for PFAS in the groundwater in 300 area, which might be a source for Kennewick's issues.
Well, Kennewick tested positive at 17 parts per trillion. They haven't verified where that sample came from. They have drinking water wells and they pull from the Columbian. So for our drinking water at the 100 area, at the K Basin, and 200 area, that's all pulled from the 100 area pumping station.
Right.
And then it goes to the settling basin, and then they pump it over to K area and then 200 west treatment. 400 area is the only drinking water well system, and it's like 2 or 3 separate wells that consolidate in and go to a treatment system. So I went out with the drinking water sampling crew and sampled all those wells with all those sources.
Oh.
So yeah, I don't know where the Kennewick source came from, but at 17 parts per trillion, it's above what EP is proposing right now.
Well, no, and that was their problem, but I was just, we have a lot of wells monitoring wells that are sampled.
Oh, yeah.
I guess my question comes down to is you have to have envisioned a sampling analysis plan, or where, I mean, you don't have a lot of the technical analysis data, or that's what
No.
you're trying to gather to build a sampling analysis plan, but you have to have a sampling analysis plan goal in your mind.
Right.
I mean, is it to find sources of PFAS from the Hanford site, or simply to make sure nobody drinks water that,
Yeah.
is contaminated?
Yeah, we are working with our soil and groundwater division. That'd be Naomi Chesky's group. And so they have two individuals as points of contact for me and my boss to go to. But we need to get these sampling analysis plans, just like you said, from our contractors. And we've already got wells that we pointed out as sources of interest based on our points of interest I mentioned earlier, especially like the 100 and 200 area fire stations. Because they used to have burn pits out there and all kinds of fun stuff. But we have well systems in that area we can sample from.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
So from EPA's perspective, what we're looking at this effort as right now is a pre-RI type work. So it's leading to remedial investigation, and if need be, to clean up. There's also the drinking water health and safety aspect. So there's two objectives. They're already, the drinking water health and safety is pretty well covered. There's a battle rhythm for that now. So this part, this main feature part is for the remedial investigation and cleanup if needed.
Well, I was just coming back to the 300 area process trenches in sequence, right? It's, well, I forgot the official word you're using, but it's flushing itself out to deal with the uranium. And it just seems like a natural issue or potential issue for a source to be released to the public drinking water via the Columbia River, because that's where it's being flushed to. But if AFFF was dumped in the 200 area, it came to the 400 area wells. I mean, that's where it would go. That's because you follow the tritium. The tritium came from the 200 area to the 400 area wells. We didn't dump tritium out of FFTF. So, I wouldn't look so much for groundwater, ground contamination as much as where it could, I think monitoring the 400 area wells is a good indicator that there's no significant contamination coming from the 200 area into the environment. But you could also test pump and treat water just to see if you've got something running around there. There's obvious opportunities with simple tests. We probably sample more water on that site, or more water samples than Hector has pups. So that's just a suggestion.
So for the 300 area process trenches, we are looking at that. And that's a DOE owned only. We don't have a contractor on that. That same thing with 183H solar evaporative basins. Basically, they're both my units. But I use CPC code to do groundwater sampling. So once we get this in HASGard and move forward with sampling and analysis plans, we could add that to the post-closure plan for 300 APT and 183H SEV. So it's a possibility. But like I said, Hanford's a 580 square mile site. We can't sample everything. It's just fiscally impossible.
All right. So in queue, we saw Pam, Chris, and then Max. Pam, go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for your presentations. Hi, Alicia. The city of Richland draws its drinking water from the Columbia River just south of the Hanford site. So I'm glad you're paying attention to this. I'm confused about one thing. You've been testing the wells throughout the site and not finding anything. And you're indicating that you need testing techniques or criteria for other places you're going to look, and you're assuming are you assuming or you know that it's going to be around the old process facilities?
It's an assumption right now. We won't know until we take physical sampling. So, yeah, and as far as Hanford goes, it's pretty much Swiss cheese with monitoring wells, but only those 3 out of the 400 area are used for drinking water. The rest pulls from Richland or in the Columbia, and it pulls way north of the Richland draw station.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Chris.
Just a few comments on the analytical method. The analytical method is called solid phase extraction, followed by liquid chromatography and tandem mass spectrometry. My guess is you're looking at an instrument cost of about $1 million. So for a laboratory to break even, given the amount of work it's going to take to clean up, you're probably looking at analytical costs of about $1,500 per analysis. Right now, if we want to do all the PCB congeners or a number of congeners in chlorinated dibenzylfurans or dioxin, I think our current analytical contracts, they're running about $1,000. There'll be much more for, given the lower detection limits for PFAS. The requirements will appear in 3 different places. DOE has a quality assurance document for analytical laboratories that will specify all the QA, QC requirements, and every laboratory that does work for DOE has to meet the requirements of that document. As far as Hanford goes, you mentioned the HAS part, the requirements will be in there. And as far as CPCCO goes, there's a document which is online called Environmental Quality Assurance Project Plan, and all requirements for sampling and analysis that are done for CPCCO will appear in that document as well. So there are 3 places where the analytical and sampling requirements will be. And if we do it routinely as opposed to a research effort, they have to be in there according to the QA requirements. Now, what I was really going to ask, and this is for EPA, is enough known about the toxicity of PFAS to be able to establish risk assessments, like baseline risk assessments, in order to then subsequently really accurately establish cleanup levels? Or is this all sort of in the, well, we think it's going to be bad, and to be on the safe side, we better clean up to this really ultra low level, which I think right now is sub parts per trillion.
So I guess for some of the substances, right, and there's, we've been discussion about how many PFAS there are. But for, what is it, 6 or 7 of them, there are toxicological data. So either cancer slope factors or the reference doses that would allow a specific number to be set and be used in a risk assessment.
And those have resulted in the maximum contamination levels, or the MCLs?
Those are the ones that have resulted in MCLs, and can also find the ones that have the information in the remediation screening level tables that EPA also publishes.
And I think I read somewhere where you're talking for groundwater about 0.04 parts per trillion.
That sounds familiar, but I can't promise that's the right number for which compounds. Because they vary, right? There's anywhere from 0.04 to 300, right? So
yeah, that's about 10,000 times lower than the lowest chemical cleanup concentration we have for any other chemical on site.
Yes.
All right. And last in queue, we have Max.
I think the number I read was 4 parts per trillion, not 0.004, but 4 parts per trillion, which is still an unbelievably low number and hard to even conceptualize how little of that is to make contamination for drinking water standards. I think my question really, Dwayne, is you kind of talked about this at the very beginning, is what are the options available for treatment? Say you find contamination in a drinking water well. I mean, maybe you just don't drink out of that well anymore. That might be the easiest way to do it. But what are the treatment options? I mean, across the nation, I tend to go to a handful of these national conferences or conferences like this, and this is always on the agenda is PFAS. And the solutions seem extremely expensive if there are even solutions that are viable. And you talked about the ubiquity of this chemical. I mean, we're probably sitting on PFAS right now, right? We're going to go sleep on the sheets that have PFAS tonight. Like it's literally everywhere. So what is the sort of the trade-off in how you can treat to a standard that's so very, very low? And what can you possibly do? And maybe I'm not asking you like what DOE might do at Hanford site, but what are the options? What could one do? What could an organization do to treat this? Maybe that's my question. What can you do?
Well, the one thing that breaks the carbon fluorine bond the best and most effective, which isn't really practical or efficient, is incineration. So after that, all the national labs are doing some kind of research for different kind of remediation methods. And you can go on PNNL's website and they'll show you all the different PFAS research they're doing. When I say I work with PNNL, I mainly work with their HAZ waste management units out at 325 radiochemical processing lab. And then I have the 300 area processing trenches, which again is DOE owned only. CPC code does the groundwater monitoring. So that's my work at the 300 area. I don't know of any defined treatment or approved treatment that would be going like the 40 CFR 268 land disposal restrictions. Like we have high level bit for tank waste stuff, but I don't know if it's even going to go into RCRA, which makes me nervous because that's my primary concentration outside of PFAS. So yeah, I can't really tell you. Only one that's been touted is the main way to do it is incineration. Now, if we do find PFAS in one of the ponds, cribs, or ditches, out at the canyons, what are we going to do? Dig it up and put it in ERDF? Dig up one hole and put it in another hole? We're going to sample ERDF too. We're going to find it out at ERDF. So, yeah, those are a lot of good questions.
Seems like if you look for it, you will find it. Is kind of the answer of PFAS.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'll note that a fact sheet on PFAS from the EPA was shared in chat. Are there any other questions or comments on this subject from the board? Okay, Dan?
I'm not real familiar with the toxicology of PFAS, but what ATSDR says is that obviously it's the dose that makes the poison. And so at these very low levels, we're not sure because the animal experiments have been done at much higher levels than the low environmental things. So the question of whether at very low levels of environmental exposure, I think whether there's risk at all, it's very possible that these things are threshold toxins. So increases in cholesterol levels, changes in liver enzymes, small decreases in birth weight, lower antibody response to some vaccines, and pregnancy-induced hypertension and preeclampsia. Those are all likely to be threshold effects rather than non-threshold effects where there's some risk at even tiny levels. However, for kidney and testicular cancer, which apparently have been seen, those may not be threshold effects because of the different mechanisms. What ATSCR does say is that animal experiments have been done at much higher levels than levels that people are exposed to routinely in the environment. So without numbers, that's perhaps not very reassuring, but still it's always the dose that makes the poison.
All right. Final questions? Not seeing in the room. Not seeing any online.
So thank you, Dwayne, for coming to the regional HAB meeting to talk about PFAS. We appreciate it.
I got voluntold 6 years ago that I'm going to be the subject matter expert for PFAS. Here I am today. I've briefed the tribes, the tribal council, sites across the complex, the national labs, EPA and ecology. Alicia and Dave we have a bi-monthly meeting, and I'm trying to be as transparent as possible, but this thing's everywhere. And
Dwayne, if you treated the Umatilla chemical depot and the mustard gas, I think you can figure this one out. I think you'll
yeah,
get there.
I did. I was there for 14 years. GB, sarin,
Sarin,
VX,
yeah, right.
and then HD, which would be distilled mustard gas. So it's the nastiest of the nasty.
You'll figure this one out. You got this.
Yeah. Well, I clean closed that site, so I don't know if I'm going to clean close Hanford.
Is there anything that needs to be said or covered before we close out the day?
Okay, so recap for tomorrow's agenda. Since we were so incredibly efficient today, we're moving up the section on board business to 11 o'clock. And so we should be done around noonish. That gets everybody on the road earlier and should make those that have asked me if they could get out of here early happy. So applaud pat yourselves on the back for getting all that advice and the work plan and the calendar approved today, because that's what's helping it out.
Thank you. Congratulations on 4 work products achieved. Ready to close this out?
All right, the meeting is adjourned for today. Thanks, everyone.